In his past life, Arthur exists as a powerful king in a highly advanced but violent world. He has white hair and glowing orange eyes, and he wears dark armor with a flowing red cape. He wields a massive glowing sword and constantly leads his forces into brutal battles against agile armored opponents. His world is plagued by relentless warfare, demonstrated by massive fleets of dark, bird-shaped airships that drop glowing red bombs onto gray, blocky cities. The resulting explosions completely devastate the urban landscapes. Despite his immense strength and his ornate silver crown, Arthur eventually meets his end. Following a bloody battle, his body floats unconsciously through a dark, ethereal void. Glowing blue bubbles and shimmering white orbs drift upward around him. Suddenly, a brilliant golden light flashes, granting Arthur a second chance at life. He wakes up and instantly realizes he has reincarnated into a completely new world. He opens his eyes inside a small wooden house and finds himself in the body of a baby boy. His new parents, Reynold and Alice, lean over his crib and excitedly greet him. They joyfully note that he shares Reynold's hair and eyes. Arthur has no idea who these people are, but he quickly realizes he still retains all his memories and intellect from his previous life as a king. Being trapped in a powerless infant's body frustrates him immensely. He hates lacking basic physical control over his own limbs. His infant body acts purely on reflex, causing his tiny hand to automatically grab Reynold's finger. Reynold laughs joyfully and thinks Arthur simply likes him, but Arthur knows it is just an involuntary action. Arthur also struggles with his basic bodily functions and ends up soiling his diapers against his will. Alice lovingly lifts his legs and pins a clean yellow cloth on him, but Arthur views his new fleshy form as a restrictive prison. He constantly wishes to wake up from this situation, but soon accepts his new reality. He decides to carefully observe his surroundings and gather as much information as possible. One afternoon, Arthur watches Reynold train in the grassy field outside their house. Reynold throws a punch and unleashes a powerful swirl of pinkish magical energy from his fists. Shortly after, Arthur watches Alice touch Reynold's head and use glowing green magic to heal his injuries. This completely fascinates Arthur, proving that supernatural powers exist in this new world. Later, Reynold travels into the lush green forest and engages in combat. He wears spiked black and gold bracers and delivers a powerful red energy punch to a massive, dark, bull-like monster. After defeating the beast alongside a group of other adventurers, Reynold returns home covered in monster blood. He joyfully opens his arms to greet Alice and Arthur, but quickly realizes he cannot hug them while covered in blood. He shows off his transforming bracers, confirming to Arthur that individuals can freely wield deadly weapons in this society. Realizing the inherent danger of a world where anyone can carry weapons and use magic, Arthur decides he needs to acquire his own strength as soon as possible. This reminds him of his past life, where he constantly faced assassination attempts. He remembers a time when a dark silhouette with a dagger attacked a pink-haired girl in her bedroom, forcing a young man to step in and kill the armored attackers. In his past life, Arthur never had the freedom to sleep safely. He patiently waits for months until he finally develops the motor skills to crawl. Alice and Reynold watch anxiously as Arthur crawls across the floorboards. Arthur stops and touches his reflection in a leaning mirror, marveling at his own face. Once his parents leave him alone, Arthur seizes the opportunity to explore. He crawls past the brick counter, makes his way into the hallway, and enters a room filled with tall bookshelves. Arthur spots a large, thick brown book and reaches up to pull it down to the floor. Opening the heavy pages, he discovers a detailed map and begins reading about his new world. He learns that he lives on the continent of Decathlon. The land is divided into 3 main territories. The dwarves live in a vast network of underground passages known as the Kingdom of Darv. The elves reside deep within a lush forest in the Kingdom of Elenoir. Finally, the humans populate the Kingdom of Sapin, which is the largest and most populated region on the continent. Arthur realizes he currently lives in Sapin. He notes that Sapin operates under a monarchy, much like his old world. The kingship here is inherited rather than taken by violent force. Arthur then pulls down another large green book decorated with ornate gold patterns. This book explains why this world's technology remains underdeveloped compared to the futuristic cities and flying vehicles of his previous life. The answer is magic. In this world, people use a power called mana, but only 1 out of every 100 people is actually born with the genetic ability to manipulate it. Arthur reads about the 2 main types of mages. Augmenters use mana to enhance their own bodies, granting them incredible physical strength, defense, and agility in combat. The book illustrates this with a muscular silhouette generating a glowing orange core and crushing rocks. Meanwhile, conjurers emit mana into the outside world, allowing them to bend their surroundings to their will and cast external spells. The book shows a wizard silhouette manipulating rocks with blue energy. To become a fully recognized mage, a person must gather scattered mana fragments within their body and fuse them together to form a solid mana core. This awakening process usually happens naturally from early adolescence to the late teens. Arthur quickly compares the concept of mana to ki from his past life. He already knows all about recognizing, controlling, and releasing inherent internal energy. Believing his past knowledge gives him a massive advantage, Arthur sits cross-legged on the wooden floor and tries to sense his own mana. He closes his eyes, holds his hands together in front of his stomach, and successfully locates the glowing yellow energy scattered within his body. Suddenly, Alice picks him up from behind and interrupts his intense focus. She assumes Arthur is just straining to soil his diaper and playfully asks if he pooped. She touches her nose to his and cuddles him affectionately. Arthur feels slightly embarrassed that his deep magical concentration looked exactly like a baby passing gas. He admits he was entirely focused and failed to notice her approaching. Alice lovingly rubs her face against his and carries him away to change him. Arthur accepts his temporary lack of freedom but remains determined to keep practicing his magic in secret. 2 full years pass and Arthur grows into an active toddler. Alice sits at her round wooden table and writes in her journal by candlelight. She notes that Arthur is a very good and curious boy, but she finds it incredibly strange that he never actually smiles. One afternoon, Reynolds sneaks Arthur outside and gives him a wooden stick. He tries to teach the toddler basic swordsmanship in the grassy field. Alice spots them from the house window and furiously storms outside. She yells aggressively at Reynolds for endangering their child, pointing out that Arthur just barely learned how to walk. Reynolds cowers in fear, sweats profusely, and apologizes rapidly to his angry wife. Watching this dynamic, Arthur realizes his mother is definitely the one who holds all the power in the household. Later, the family takes a trip to a local town. Alice carries Arthur on her back as they walk down the bright cobblestone streets. Arthur uses this trip as an opportunity to carefully assess the kingdom's technological capabilities. He observes the various goods sold at the wooden market stalls. He sees shops displaying heavy weapons like axes, maces, and falchions. He also examines colorful gems and light blue crystal clusters on a merchant's shelf. Eventually, they stop at a stall where a dark-haired man in a black cloak demonstrates fire magic. The man conjures a swirling orange flame directly from his palm. Seeing external magic cast in person excites Arthur and provides him with extremely valuable information. As the sun sets, Alice carries a sleepy Arthur in a wicker basket on her back and walks along a dirt path toward their home. Arthur feels comfortable and realizes his parents truly take delicate care of him. He enjoys the warmth of their family bond. This affection triggers another memory from his past life. He remembers being abandoned in a cardboard box on cold stone steps. As an orphan, he grew up in a facility and once reached out through a large iron gate toward a family walking away. In his previous life, he never experienced parental warmth, making him appreciate his new family even more. Back at home, Alice puts Arthur to bed. She hopes Arthur chooses a peaceful life, but she knows he shares Reynolds' adventurous blood. The next day, Arthur stands on a wooden bench and looks out the open window. He watches Reynolds practice his martial arts in the grassy yard. Reynolds holds his palms out and ignites a glowing orange ember. He then shifts into a combat stance and forcefully shatters a large gray rock into multiple fragments with a single strike. He continues his routine, performing high kicks that create visible red and blue shockwaves and send debris floating into the air. Arthur watches the entire display and confirms that his father is indeed a highly skilled augmenter. Alice soon approaches from behind and pulls Arthur away from the window. She tells him it is time for his nap and strictly forbids him from reading any books. However, Arthur gives her a cute, wide-eyed, sparkling look. Alice tries her best to resist, but she eventually caves in and allows him to read for a little bit. Taking advantage of the quiet time, Arthur sits cross-legged on the floor next to the bookshelf and opens a large volume. He closes his eyes and begins the highly dangerous process of forming his mana core. He focuses his mind and forces all the scattered mana fragments inside his body to gather into a single point in his abdomen. A glowing yellow light manifests between his hands. It requires immense concentration and effort, but Arthur pushes forward relentlessly. He is determined to manifest his core years earlier than the natural awakening age. Meanwhile, outside the house, Reynolds hands Alice a light blue cup of water. Suddenly, a massive explosion erupts from within their home. The blast completely blows the grass roof apart and sends fiery wooden debris flying across the landscape. Thick black smoke billows into the sky. Reynolds immediately jumps on top of Alice and shields her on the ground. Once the initial blast subsides, Alice screams for Arthur, knowing her young son was still inside the house. Reynolds runs toward the ruined building and stares in sheer shock at the scattered wreckage. Alice catches up to him and covers her mouth in pure horror. They look through a jagged hole in the destroyed wall and see Arthur floating high in the sky above the lush forest. A brilliant golden and blue aura completely surrounds his small body. Arthur successfully gathered his mana fragments and manifested his mana core, but the sheer force of his premature awakening completely destroyed the house. The magical energy eventually dissipates and Arthur starts falling rapidly toward the splintered wooden floorboards. Fearing for his life, Arthur closes his eyes and shouts as he braces for a fatal impact. He feels completely helpless as he plummets downward. Right before Arthur hits the ground, Reynold activates his augmenter powers and leaps into action. His hands glow intensely with red energy. He quickly catches a massive falling support beam and stands protectively over Alice and Arthur, safely shielding them from the collapsing wreckage. With the immediate danger finally over, Alice drops to her knees on the ruined floor. She tearfully embraces Arthur, completely ignoring the bleeding scratches on her own face. Reynold stands behind them and smiles warmly, incredibly relieved that his family is safe. Alice cries tears of joy and holds Arthur tightly while he still has mucus running down his face from crying. Seeing their genuine distress and relief, Arthur is completely overwhelmed with emotion. In his past life as a ruthless orphan king, he never experienced this kind of unconditional parental love. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, Arthur truly understands the warmth of a family and realizes just how deeply his new parents care for him. In his previous life as King Grey, he remembers a time when a young man kneels on the floor of a dark room flanked by heavily armored guards. This man actually tried to assassinate the king, which is a crime strictly punished by immediate execution. However, the council decides to show mercy by sparing him from death and ordering him and his family to be escorted back to their home country to await official sentencing. The desperate man frantically begs the king to reconsider the ruling. He openly admits his total guilt but completely begs for Grey to spare his wife and child, explaining that returning home means facing endless torture far worse than death. He says he fully accepts that horrible fate as his own punishment, but he cannot bear it for his family. Grey's guard angrily tells the man to shut up and know his place, stating that the judgment has already been passed and the king should not be bothered by this. Still, the desperate man continues to cry out for mercy for his family as his wife tightly hugs their child. Grey stares at the crying mother and child for a moment before making a swift and brutal decision. Without saying a word, he quickly draws his sword and executes the woman and the child right there on the floor. The guard proudly announces that the king has delivered true mercy by using his own hands to spare the 2 of them from endless suffering. The devastated assassin looks at his dead family on the floor and then looks up at Grey, crying uncontrollably but loudly shouting out a genuine thank you to the king for saving them from a much worse fate. Grey just looks down at him with a completely stern expression, quietly processing the incredibly heavy weight of his action. Sometime later in his new life, Arthur stands in a lush green field outside his family's cottage. His father Reynold holds up a pair of heavily spiked black and gold gauntlets, proudly telling Arthur that he can finally be exactly like his dad. Arthur gets super excited, but Reynold instantly pulls out a simple wooden sword instead, explaining that using the real heavy gauntlets right now would just get Arthur killed before he could even land a strike. Reynold takes his own wooden sword and tells Arthur to come right at him with everything he has. Arthur charges forward at full speed and fiercely swings his wooden practice sword. Reynold easily blocks the strike, but then Arthur intensely focuses his energy. His wooden sword suddenly bursts into a glowing orange flame of raw mana. Arthur leaps high into the air and forcefully strikes Reynold's arm, knocking Reynold's wooden sword right out of his hand and onto the grass. Arthur smiles brightly and asks his dad how he did. Inside the wooden house later that day, Reynold and Alice get into a massive screaming argument over Arthur's future. Reynold points out that Arthur is an absolute prodigy who easily cut through a mana-reinforced wooden stick at just 4 years old. Because of this, Reynold angrily insists that Arthur desperately needs a real magical mentor to properly develop his insane talents. Alice aggressively refuses to listen to reason. She drops to the floor and tightly hugs Arthur, completely rejecting the idea of sending her sweet little boy away to some distant town all by himself. Reynold yells that they need to think about Arthur's long-term future, but Alice shuts him down, loudly demanding that he focus on the present and keep their family together. After going back and forth, Reynold finally suggests a massive compromise. Instead of sending Arthur away alone, the entire family will just pack up their things and move to the huge city of Xyrus together. Alice instantly agrees to this idea, completely changing her angry mood. They both laugh joyfully and excitedly prepare for the long journey, praising Arthur for being a complete genius. A short time later, the family packs all their belongings onto large wooden wagons pulled by massive horned reptilian beasts. They meet up with the Twin Horns, the former adventuring party that Reynold and Alice used to travel with. Arthur politely introduces himself to the whole group. He first meets Adam Crench, a spear-wielding warrior with red hair and a nasty scar on his nose. Then he meets Angela Rose, a cheerful blonde conjurer who immediately pulls Arthur into a suffocating hug because she finds him so cute. Next is Durden Walker, a towering but incredibly gentle conjurer who Arthur shakes hands with. He also meets Jasmine Flamesworth, a quiet girl with short black hair who wields twin daggers. Finally, he reunites with Helen Shard, a blue-haired elven archer who warmly welcomes him to the caravan. The large group sets off on their journey, traveling steadily along a dirt path right beside massive white cliffs. Riding inside the wooden wagon, Arthur looks out at the landscape and compares this highly primitive beast-drawn transport to the advanced flying vehicles and massive neon cities of his past life, admitting that this simple method of travel still has its own unique charm. As night starts to fall, the group sets up a camp in a lush forest clearing surrounded by tall mountains. Alice happily hands out fresh bread to Arthur while the men sit around a warm campfire discussing the extreme dangers of the outside world. Suddenly, a massive pack of giant gray wolves emerges from the dark tree line and completely surrounds the camp. Arthur watches from the safety of the dark wooden wagon as the Twin Horns instantly spring into action. Jasmine quickly leaps through the air wielding 2 daggers and effortlessly slices down several wolves, causing blood to splatter everywhere. Reynold charges forward in his armor and completely crushes a massive gray wolf's face with a powerful mana-infused punch. Adam quickly thrusts his cloth-wrapped spear right through another beast, while Helen snipes them from the top of the dark wooden carriage with perfect accuracy. Durden steps up in his white cloak and blasts a massive glowing yellow energy orb directly into the forest, causing a massive explosion of dirt and debris that wipes out a whole pack. Angela finishes the chaotic fight by casting a glowing green magical barrier from her staff that violently knocks the remaining wolves away. Seeing their incredible teamwork and raw destructive power, Arthur realizes he needs to train much harder to reach their level. Later that night, everyone relaxes around the campfires and eats fresh grilled meat skewers. Arthur sits quietly on a log next to Jasmine, looking a bit down and claiming he is already full. Reynold walks over to the fire, completely ignoring a badly bleeding wound on his arm from the battle. Alice immediately stops him and uses her glowing green magic to heal his injury perfectly. Arthur learns that his mother is an incredibly rare type of mage called an emitter. Because powerful healers are so highly valued, they often become massive targets for criminals and warlords. This is the exact reason why Reynold and Alice originally moved out to the middle of nowhere in the country, completely hiding their identities to protect themselves from getting kidnapped or exploited. After Reynold is fully healed, Adam walks over with a highly confident smirk and asks to borrow Arthur for a quick sparring session before bed. Out in the dark grassy field under the night sky, Adam slides into a combat stance with his spear and tells Arthur he will not hold back at all. Arthur tightly grips his wooden sword and fully prepares himself. When the spar begins, Arthur unleashes a massive burst of bright green magical energy from his feet and aggressively charges forward. His wooden sword intensely glows with bright orange heat as he desperately tries to match Adam's speed. Adam easily dodges the rapid attacks and violently swings his spear against Arthur's wooden sword, creating a bright orange shockwave. The heavy impact completely knocks Arthur backward into the air, making him drop his weapon. Arthur hits the grassy ground extremely hard. Angela quickly rushes over with her glowing green wand and uses her healing magic to fix Arthur's injuries. Meanwhile, the rest of the adventuring party aggressively scolds Adam for going way too hard on a literal 4-year-old kid. Adam nervously defends himself, claiming the kid is a total monster in combat and that his current body is just too light to handle the impact. Afterwards, Jasmine approaches Arthur alone in the dark field and intensely demands to know how he fights like that. Arthur recognizes the incredibly stubborn and determined look in her eyes, realizing she will absolutely not stop bothering him until she gets some answers. Over the next few weeks on the road, Jasmine becomes Arthur's unofficial combat mentor. They frequently run through the forest together, thoroughly practicing archery, physical conditioning, and high-speed movement. Arthur constantly uses his green mana to glide effortlessly across the grass while Jasmine carefully watches his rapid progress. One night, while Arthur reads his giant magic book by the fire, Jasmine hands him a fresh skewer of roasted meat. The next day, out in a bright green field, Jasmine formally gifts Arthur a real, high-quality dagger for his birthday. She specifically thanks him for teaching her entirely new things during their sparring sessions. The other women in the party excitedly watch them from afar, extremely surprised that the usually cold and distant Jasmine has warmed up to Arthur so much. Alice watches her son grow stronger and cries a few happy tears, realizing he is growing up extremely fast. The caravan eventually continues its journey, traveling along a highly narrow and incredibly dangerous dirt path completely overlooking a steep rocky cliff. Suddenly, a massive barrage of arrows rains down from the rocky cliffs above, completely halting the wagons. A huge group of masked bandits heavily surrounds the travelers. Angela immediately raises a magical green pendant that floods the entire area with blinding light, fully revealing the sheer overwhelming number of enemies hiding in the rocks. The bandit leader, a massive muscular man wearing a fur collar and wielding a gigantic axe, aggressively orders his men to capture the women and the kid alive so they can be sold for maximum profit. The bandits instantly slide down the steep rocky slopes amidst thick clouds of dust and launch a full-scale violent ambush. A totally chaotic brawl erupts all over the mountain path. Durden violently blasts the attackers with his magical scepter, while Helen rapidly fires her arrows to take out the masked archers hiding on the cliffs above. Jasmine and Adam fiercely fight off the armed bandits swarming the animal-drawn carriages. Despite their highly impressive strength, the sheer overwhelming numbers of the bandits completely overpower the twin horns. Reynold desperately tries to protect his family but gets violently thrown backward through the wreckage of a shattered wooden cart, suffering a really bad bleeding wound to his shoulder. He quickly gets back up on his feet and stands defensively in front of Alice and Arthur. The massive bandit leader casually approaches them and confidently lowers his huge axe. Reynold completely knows he cannot hold them off forever. He desperately orders Arthur to take Alice and run away immediately. When Arthur strongly insists that he is strong enough to stay and fight, Reynold reveals a massive family secret, strictly telling Arthur that he must absolutely protect Alice because she is heavily pregnant with another baby. Hearing this completely shocks Arthur. It instantly triggers the intense memories of his past life where he was constantly forced to make impossible choices regarding the lives of others. Realizing he finally has the actual chance to be a big brother, Arthur seriously promises his father that he will protect them. Reynold smiles incredibly proudly and furiously charges directly at the bandit leader, his fists glowing with intense pink energy. Reynold lands a massive punch right into the bandit leader's guard, loudly screaming that he is not holding back anymore. While Reynold successfully distracts the boss, Arthur urgently grabs Alice's hand and sprints away from the battle as fast as he can. However, a hooded bandit mage standing on a high rocky cliff violently spots them running. The mage raises his wand and aggressively unleashes a massive vortex of swirling green magical energy right at them. The violent wind blasts across a rocky cliffside, instantly throwing Arthur backward high into the sky. Alice desperately reaches out to catch him, but the sheer force of the spell completely knocks him over the edge of the steep drop. As Arthur plummets helplessly toward the dense green forest below, he quickly pulls out the new dagger Jasmine gave him. He desperately activates a hidden glowing wire attached to the hilt and violently hurls the dagger directly at the hooded mage. The sharp blade perfectly hits its mark, and the thin wire wraps tightly around the bandit. Arthur uses his rapidly falling momentum to violently drag the screaming mage right off the cliff along with him. Arthur falls rapidly through the empty air alongside flaming rocks and sharp magical slashes. Looking up at his intensely crying mother one last time, Arthur feels a strangely comforting sense of total fulfillment despite losing his new life so soon. He finally completely understands the actions of the desperate assassin from his past life. He completely understands why a person would gladly sacrifice themselves without any hesitation whatsoever just to save their family. And he finally understands the incredibly deep and agonizing sorrow of never seeing those loved ones again. Closing his eyes as he plummets toward the ground, Arthur sadly sheds a single emotional tear, deeply regretting that he will never get the amazing chance to be a big brother to his unborn sibling. The entire world completely fades to black as Arthur fully accepts his tragic fate. Sometime later, Arthur slowly wakes up in a totally unknown and mysterious location. He looks around in complete confusion until a mysterious voice suddenly calls out and casually tells him good morning. Arthur experiences a strange vision of a vast blue ocean under the bright sunlight. He remarks that he has found something incredibly beautiful. He doubts he will ever see anything like it again. A mysterious voice agrees with him and confirms its beauty. Arthur asks if something bad is going to happen. The voice honestly replies that bad things will happen if nothing changes. Arthur suddenly snaps awake. He finds himself lying on the cold floor of a dark cavern. He looks up and is absolutely horrified. A massive, dark-armored demon with glowing red eyes looms over him. Arthur panics and tries to escape. He jumps to his feet and fiercely throws a punch at the creature. He loses his footing and tumbles backward off a steep rocky cliff. As he falls through the air, a massive demon hand rapidly reaches out and catches him. Arthur lands face down on the dusty cavern floor, perfectly safe. The demon casually tells him that he still has a lot to learn. She assures the terrified boy that she is actually on his side. Arthur is highly skeptical and asks her to explain. The demon simply reaches out and plucks a glowing yellow fruit from a nearby vine. She places a whole pile of them on the ground right in front of him. She tells him that he must be starving. She insists he needs to eat something if he wants his heavily injured body to recover. She adds that he should consider himself incredibly lucky to have survived the fall from the cliff. Arthur nervously hesitates and tries to ask more questions. The demon strictly tells him that he will not get any answers until he starts eating. Arthur carefully picks up one of the fruits and takes a hesitant bite. The taste is overwhelmingly terrible. He instantly bursts into loud tears and cries out with his mouth wide open. Despite the horrific flavor, he forces himself to swallow it and grabs another one. The demon casually reminds him to chew his food properly. After finishing his awful meal, Arthur wipes his face. He immediately asks the demon if his parents are okay after the violent bandit ambush. The demon explains that her vision extends much further than most. She uses her magical sight to check on them. She officially confirms that his family is perfectly alive. She says they successfully continued their journey a few days ago. Arthur is completely overcome with massive relief. He smiles warmly with tears streaming down his face and genuinely thanks the giant demon. The demon then formally introduces herself as Sylvia. Following this encounter, a brief vision of Arthur's past life as King Grey flashes through his mind. Two silhouetted figures sit together on a dark hill overlooking a shimmering ocean. Grey asks the other person what they think he should do. The person replies that he already knows the answer. They agree that there are no secrets between them anymore. Days quickly pass inside the dark cave. Arthur's brutal wounds completely heal thanks to the magical fruits. He desperately wants to return home to his family as soon as possible. He knows from an old map that they are currently located on the dangerous edge of the Elshire Forest. This hostile territory is completely filled with wild animals and deadly outlaws. However, Sylvia explains that getting him out of here is not going to be simple. She tells him that creating a magical breach in space takes a massive amount of preparation and time. Arthur decides to stay active while they wait. He trains his body by aggressively swinging a wooden stick around the cavern. Sylvia watches him carefully. She notes that it is good to see him moving around so energetically. Arthur realizes that Sylvia never talks about her own past. He wonders if she fought something incredibly powerful before meeting him, but she refuses to share any details. Despite her highly intimidating appearance, Sylvia is actually incredibly warm and kind to him. Arthur continues his intense training and sits cross-legged on a pile of stones. He begins deeply meditating. Suddenly, his body erupts in a brilliant golden light. He successfully forms a mana core inside himself. Sylvia is extremely impressed by this feat. She is highly surprised that someone his age could develop a mana core so quickly. Since he proved his magical potential, she asks if he is capable of performing a highly advanced technique. She raises her large clawed hand and manifests a brilliant orb of swirling light. Arthur recognizes exactly what she is doing. He explains that she is simultaneously casting magic while actively gathering fresh mana. He compares it to a plane refueling in midair. Arthur admits he had absolutely no idea such a thing was even physically possible for humans. Sylvia explains that humans have far too many strict preconceptions about mana. They falsely believe that gathering and using mana must be two completely separate actions. She reveals that mana beasts perform this exact simultaneous technique naturally. She asks Arthur if he would like to learn how to do it. Arthur instantly agrees with huge excitement. Before teaching him, Sylvia asks a highly important question. She wants to know exactly what he plans to do with this incredible new strength. Arthur thinks back to the brutal bandit attack. He fiercely grits his teeth. He declares that he will use his newfound power to deliver death unto his enemies. The moment he says this, the entire world goes black. Arthur violently falls backward onto the frozen, icy ground. Sylvia aggressively stomps her giant foot right next to him. She violently flicks his forehead and knocks him completely unconscious. Arthur quickly wakes up and rubs his head in total confusion. He shouts in protest. Sylvia coldly tells him that he failed her test. She strictly refuses to teach her magic to someone with such a dark and hateful look on their face. Arthur angrily argues back. He asks if killing enemies is what everyone naturally does to survive. Sylvia admits that it is. She asks him if he actually enjoys having a head completely full of thoughts about killing and revenge. She reaches out her giant dark claw and gently pats Arthur's hair. She explains that that her massive hands could easily tear him to shreds in an instant. She adds that they can also touch him with extreme gentleness. She asks which one he prefers. Arthur quietly admits that he prefers the gentle touch. Sylvia agrees with him completely. She explains that rage and hatred burn very easily and quickly express themselves as intense violence. She warns that absolute hate is the only thing that remains in the end. She heavily insists that she does not want Arthur to use his second chance at life for something so highly destructive. Arthur listens to her wise words. He realizes that Sylvia seems to understand his troubled past life perfectly. Sylvia resets the conversation and asks the exact same question again. She wants to know what Arthur will do with his new power. This time, Arthur closes his eyes and thinks deeply about his loving parents and his friends from the Twin Horns. He looks up at Sylvia with pure determination. He proudly states that he wants to protect the people he deeply cares about. Sylvia holds up a small, glowing red flame in her hand. She praises him and declares that to be the perfect answer. A sudden flashback to his previous life plays out. King Grey stands in a pristine room with an elderly man named Marlin. Marlin serves as the head of the parliament. The parliament actually holds all the real political authority in their dying nation. Grey's entire role as the king is to act as a ruthless executor for war. Marlin highly praises Grey for bringing their people massive wealth and glory through his countless violent victories. However, Grey is completely exhausted by the endless bloodshed. He firmly tells Marlin that he is officially done with this life. He abruptly walks away down a long hallway. He completely abandons his throne and leaves his shattered mask behind. In another memory, Grey fights a massive monster wearing a terrifying pig mask. Grey desires total control over his Kai to keep winning his brutal battles. He intensely focuses his energy and delivers a massive fiery sword slash. He completely obliterates the giant beast in a massive explosion. Back in the present, Arthur perfectly applies Sylvia's teachings. He fiercely charges through the dark cavern. He successfully manages to gather mana while simultaneously using it. He creates a radiant multicolored aura around his wooden stick. Sylvia watches him glowing with bright purple energy. She proudly praises his incredible progress. Suddenly, a massive starry blue eye violently tears through the fabric of the cavern. A terrifying dark-armored demon with enormous horns violently steps out of a dark portal. This new demon heavily states that it easily tracks Sylvia down by following the strong scent of her blood. It demands that she come quietly. Sylvia completely refuses. The dark demon violently declares that it will use force and summons a massive sphere of purple energy. Knowing the extreme danger, Sylvia tells the terrified Arthur not to worry. She instantly surrounds herself in a massive vortex of blinding teal magical energy. The intense magical storm completely shatters her dark-armored disguise. The bright light fades, and Sylvia finally reveals her true, glorious form. She is actually a massive, majestic white-winged dragon with long flowing white hair and calm purple eyes. The dark demon mocks her transformation. It aggressively warns that tapping into this much raw power will heavily cost her what little life she has left. Sylvia calmly replies that she does not mind the cost. She says she has been incredibly happy lately. She just wishes their peaceful time could have lasted a little bit longer. Sylvia opens her mouth and fires an absolutely massive beam of radiant blue energy directly at the dark demon. The blast causes a gigantic explosion of shimmering purple and blue light. The dark demon emerges mostly unharmed. It violently retaliates by launching a dark, swirling purple energy orb right back at her. The devastating attack completely consumes Sylvia in a massive explosion. The dust finally settles, and Sylvia is left lying heavily on the rocky ground. She bleeds out as bright glowing orange markings suddenly appear all over her neck and face. Realizing that their time is officially up, Sylvia turns to Arthur and urgently calls him over to her side. Arthur slowly approaches the majestic white dragon. He is completely stunned by everything that just happened. Sylvia apologizes and explains that she has to send him away now. She is highly confident she taught him everything he needs to know to survive. She asks him one final time what he will use his power for. Arthur firmly repeats his answer. He promises to strictly use it to protect the people he cares about. Sylvia smiles gently and accepts this as a sacred promise. She tells Arthur that she has a few important parting gifts for him. A glowing multicolored egg-like orb slowly emerges directly from her chest. It floats over to Arthur. She strictly instructs him to wrap the egg carefully in one of her white feathers and to take extremely good care of it. Next, she gently touches his arm. Arthur's sleeve instantly shreds apart. A bright glowing orange mark rapidly spreads all the way up his arm. He asks her what this strange magic means. Sylvia softly replies that he will fully understand it in due time. Sylvia finally admits that she could have easily sent him back home on the very first day they met. She selfishly chose not to. She confesses that she genuinely enjoyed living with him and simply did not want him to leave. Arthur becomes incredibly emotional. He completely realizes that he is still way too weak to protect her from the dark demon. He tearfully declares that she is his real family. He loudly calls her his grandma. Sylvia is deeply moved by his words. She sheds a single sorrowful tear and warmly thanks the child for everything. Sylvia successfully opens a swirling, vibrant, multicolored portal right behind Arthur. Arthur desperately cries out and aggressively begs Sylvia to come through the portal with him. The magical force aggressively pulls him inside. It completely separates them forever. Back in the cavern, the dark demon casually approaches the heavily wounded Sylvia. It confidently notes that her previous attack was surprisingly weak. Sylvia simply opens her purple eye and fully unleashes one final incredible beam of blinding blue energy directly into the demon's face. Meanwhile, Arthur floats helplessly through a vibrant cosmic void. Sylvia's gentle voice echoes clearly in his mind one last time. She reminds him of her highly important lesson. She pleads with him not to let his heart fill with dark hatred and rage. She truly wishes for his brand new life to be entirely filled with happiness and light. To his absolute shock, she directly addresses him as King Grey. This completely confirms that she knew the massive secret of his past life reincarnation the entire time. Arthur is deeply moved and completely overwhelmed by her final blessing. The bright light finally fades. Arthur slowly wakes up perfectly safe in a lush green forest clearing. He touches the wrapped white feather holding the magical egg and realizes that Sylvia is truly gone. He completely breaks down and cries heavily on the grassy field. After a moment of deep sorrow, he remembers his incredibly important promise to her. He wipes away his tears and grabs his small bag. He stands up tall with a fiercely determined expression on his face. Arthur stares out into the dense, unknown forest. He is fully ready to begin the next chapter of his life. Arthur uses his magic to make his feet glow with a bright green aura as he sprints rapidly through the lush forest. He carries a brown bag filled with white feathers across his chest. He stops on a massive tree trunk and notices some people nearby. He peeks cautiously from behind the tree and looks down at a clearing below. He spots 4 bandits wearing fur-trimmed clothing gathered around a horse-drawn carriage. A large bandit covers the mouth of a crying silver-haired elf girl named Tessia to keep her quiet. Another scarred bandit with long, dark hair smiles and mentions that elf girls sell for a massive amount of money. They decide to take Tessia and sell her as a slave. The scarred boss orders his men to leave the women and the young boy in the caravan alive because hurting them would lower their overall value. The bandits aggressively throw Tessia into a dark storage room filled with large sacks and wooden crates. Arthur watches them from his hiding spot and immediately realizes their plan to traffic her. He remembers his master Sylvia's strict instructions to never let his negative emotions and anger control his actions. He calms himself down and decides to wait for the perfect moment to strike. The bandits travel through the forest until sunset and eventually set up a campsite with a small campfire near their large white wagon. The scarred boss grins and tells his men that it seems like a waste to sell Tessia without having some fun with her first. Arthur sits cross-legged on a large tree branch and meditates quietly in the warm orange light. Night completely falls over the dark forest. Arthur notices the bandits' 3 captive antlered wolves resting nearby. He realizes the wolves are controlled by magic and decides to use that to his advantage. He throws 3 small brown seed-like items at the wolves. The items hit the animals and instantly cause them to start howling aggressively in unison. The loud noise highly irritates the bandits sitting around the campfire. One muscular bandit in a red outfit gets incredibly annoyed and kicks one of the wolves. He complains that the noise will attract wild beasts and wanders off alone into the dark, misty woods to relieve himself. Arthur quietly stalks him through the trees. He ambushes the muscular bandit and completely engulfs him in a brilliant red magical light. The bandit falls face down onto the grassy ground. Arthur stands over the defeated man and steals a wooden-handled knife directly from his belt. Meanwhile, a portly bandit notices his friend is taking way too long and walks into the dark woods to look for him. Arthur drops down from the trees and lands squarely on the portly man's shoulders. He tightly pulls the man's hair back and holds the stolen knife straight to his throat, quickly eliminating him. Arthur stands alone in the misty forest and notes that combat in his new child body is extremely exhausting. Back at the camp, a third bald bandit comes out to investigate the strange silence. Arthur sneaks up right behind him and slashes his back with a glowing blue magical sword. The bald man falls to the ground in agonizing pain and bleeds heavily. The scarred boss hears the commotion and steps out of his tent holding a large curved knife. He sees his injured subordinate and realizes their attacker is actually a young boy who knows magic. The boss gets extremely excited and states that a kid mage is a rare golden ticket. He fully intends to capture Arthur alive and sell him for even more money than Tessia. The boss completely unleashes his power and creates swirling red energy around his hands. He launches a massive pinkish-red energy blast directly at Arthur. Arthur effortlessly dodges the explosion and lands perfectly on his bare feet. The angry boss charges forward and violently grabs Arthur by his shirt collar. He fiercely hurls the young boy through the dark air toward a large rocky structure. Arthur firmly grips his knife, recovers his balance, and skids across the rocky ground. He instantly lunges back at the scarred boss. The boss kicks Arthur hard, sending him tumbling across the slanted grassy field. Arthur quickly rolls back onto his feet and sets up a trap. He pulls a thin wire tightly across the trees. The scarred boss spots the wire and mocks Arthur's slick tricks. He confidently challenges Arthur to come and take his weapon. Arthur immediately condenses his fire magic and blasts the boss with a massive explosion of flames. The intense heat severely burns the boss's hands and face. The scarred man screams in extreme pain and completely gives up on trying to capture Arthur alive. He furiously declares he will just kill the boy and sell his dead carcass to demented collectors. He aggressively throws his sharp knife directly at Arthur. Arthur perfectly dodges the weapon and counters by throwing his own knife with incredible speed. The sharp blade firmly embeds itself right into the scarred boss's forehead. The boss falls to the ground screaming with blank white eyes before dying. The bald bandit is still alive and desperately begs Arthur for mercy. Arthur firmly tells the man that Tessia probably begged them the exact same way and refuses to show any pity. Arthur heads over to the dark storage room to find Tessia. She sits trembling on the floor with a white blindfold covering her eyes. Arthur removes her blindfold and gently tells her it is completely safe now and she can finally go home. Tessia notices the glowing magic around Arthur and the minor cuts on his arms and legs. She is completely awestruck and admits this is her first time interacting with a child her own age. Arthur guides her outside to the dark forest. They bury the dead bandits under small mounds and mark the graves with a large stone. Arthur grabs his large green backpack and hands Tessia her white-wrapped belongings. Tessia asks what happened to her kidnappers. Arthur simply lies and tells her they had an unfortunate accident. He then tells her it was nice meeting her and turns to leave so he can return to his own family. Tessia completely panics and tightly grabs his sleeve. She cries hysterically and begs him not to leave her all alone in the dark woods. She calls him a brute for abandoning a delicate girl and claims her parents warned her about tree golems eating children. Arthur asks if she knows which direction her home is. She admits she got completely lost while chasing bugs and has absolutely no idea where she is. Arthur realizes he cannot just abandon a helpless child. He agrees to escort her back to her homeland. Before they leave, Tessia suggests setting the bandits' captive wolves free so they do not starve to death. Arthur worries the beast might attack them, but Tessia insists the forest hounds were just being used by bad people. She proudly states that elves cherish all life. They remove the studded leather harnesses and release the animals. Arthur and Tessia begin walking together through the dense forest. They walk along a high, rocky cliffside path. Tessia properly introduces herself as Tessia Aerolith and asks for his name. He formally introduces himself as Arthur Lewin. Later that evening, they set up a small campsite next to the cliff. Arthur cooks a simple meal of boiled jerky and salt in a pan over a crackling campfire. He hands Tessia a wooden bowl filled with the food. She takes a bite and makes a wildly disgusted face at the terrible taste. Arthur watches her and reflects on his past life. He always viewed food as just a basic means to get nutrition, but he realizes a growing child needs better tasting meals. Tessia complains and demands something sweet instead. They sit by the fire and casually discuss their homes. Tessia explains that her parents are extremely busy people, so she spends most of her time hanging out with her grandfather and her caretakers. Arthur asks her what her homeland of Elenoir is like. She happily tells him it is a very fun place. The next day, they continue walking through the bright, sunlit forest. They spot a small, dark gray rabbit sitting by Tessia's beat. Later, they find strange, glowing yellow bugs floating around the trees. Tessia explains that her people use these bugs all the time to mark safe paths. She calls them natural earrings and tries to give one to Arthur, but he firmly refuses. Tessia happily mentions that she will start training at her master's place as soon as her mana awakens. Arthur asks if she gets assigned a specific master and wonders why there is no organized education system in her country. He quickly drops the subject and keeps walking. As they travel, Arthur notices that a large gray wolf wearing a leather harness is secretly following them. He instantly recognizes it as one of the forest hounds they freed earlier. He regrets not killing it but tells Tessia to keep moving. When night falls, they pitch a small tent under a massive tree. Arthur tells Tessia to go sleep inside the tent while he stays outside to keep watch. Tessia feels incredibly scared of the dark and desperately wants him to stay with her. She makes up a lie claiming her grandfather warned her that all human men are perverts with many wives. Arthur gets highly offended and asks her if she even knows what a pervert is. She admits she does not know. She then orders him to stay inside the tent for their mutual safety and demands he escort her if she needs to use the bathroom. Arthur realizes she is just deeply afraid of ghosts. He agrees to sleep inside. He sits quietly in the dark tent and watches her sleep soundly under a thick blanket. He smiles and thinks this must be exactly what having a little sister feels like. The next morning, they resume their long trek and climb up a very steep, icy rock face situated right next to a bright cascading waterfall. Tessia easily reaches the top and joyfully raises her arms. Arthur struggles to climb while carrying his massive backpack. Suddenly, Arthur feels an unbearable, agonizing pain completely radiating from his newly formed mana core. He sweats profusely and tightly clutches his chest in agony. He collapses onto the mossy dirt path. Tessia rushes over and frantically asks if he is okay. Arthur lies and claims he is perfectly fine because he does not want to worry her. He leans heavily against a massive tree trunk, completely exhausted and panting for air. He secretly debates telling her the truth, but decides against it. Just then, a massive furry paw steps onto the path right in front of them. The large gray wolf from earlier approaches them, carrying a large dead boar in its mouth. The beast drops the dead animal directly at Arthur's feet and casually walks away. Tessia cheerfully claps her hands and explains that the wolf brought them food to repay them for being good people. That night, they sit by a crackling campfire and roast the fresh boar meat on long wooden skewers. Tessia takes a bite and happily declares the meat is incredibly tender and delicious. She also reveals she found some wild mushrooms in the forest. She explains the women in Elenoir eat them constantly for nutrition, but apologizes and notes they might be a bit too strong for human men. Arthur sits quietly on a rock holding his skewer. The heavy meal and the residual pain from his magical core quickly catch up to him. They retreat into the dark tent for the night. Tessia sits across from Arthur and smiles as she talks about her favorite storybooks. She mentions reading exciting tales about the human and dwarf kingdoms and expressing her strong desire to visit them despite the bad rumors. Arthur's eyelids grow incredibly heavy and he completely stops listening to her. He passes out and slumps against his luggage. Tessia realizes he is fast asleep. She gently wraps her dark furry cloak around his shoulders to keep him warm and proudly states that she is the more grown-up one after all. The next morning, Arthur wakes up to find himself being carried in a large makeshift carrier completely strapped to Tessia's back. She hauls him through a dark, misty forest. Arthur feels deeply embarrassed about his sudden weakness and awkwardly apologizes to her. Tessia cheerfully accepts his apology and assures him they are almost at their final destination. She asks if she can start calling him Art since they are now good friends. Arthur gives a dry, sarcastic response, formally calling her Her Highness Tessia and aggressively mocking his own low status as a country bumpkin. Tessia gets highly annoyed and accuses him of making terrible old man jokes. She threatens to stop treating him like a friend. Arthur completely ignores her threats and points toward the dense trees ahead. They walk a bit further and suddenly spot a brilliant green portal of light glowing intensely at the very base of a massive ancient tree. Tessia gets extremely excited and loudly announces that they have finally arrived at her home. She confidently steps right into the magical, glowing portal and instantly disappears into the bright light. Arthur stands completely stunned alone in the misty forest. Suddenly, a mysterious voice echoes through the area, stating that the use of a teleportation gate has instantly alerted them. Realizing Tessia might be walking straight into a dangerous trap, Arthur frantically yells her name and rushes directly into the glowing green portal to save her. Arthur rushes directly into the glowing green portal to save Tessia from a potential trap, but instantly finds himself surrounded by blue uniformed elf soldiers aiming sharp swords at him in a stone-paved courtyard. Two guards violently grab Tessia by her shoulders to hold her back while a gray-haired guard orders his men to kill the human boy immediately. The guards completely assume Arthur is a dangerous savage who kidnapped and brainwashed their princess. Tessia desperately screams at them to stop, insisting that Arthur is not a bad person and that he actually saved her life in the forest. The guards completely refuse to lower their weapons until a bright green energy orb suddenly manifests right in front of them. The light dissipates to reveal Virion, the former king of Elenoir and Tessia's grandfather. He strictly commands the guards to release Arthur at once. Virion turns to Arthur and formally thanks him for providing aid to his granddaughter and bringing her back safely. Arthur is completely shocked to discover that the little girl he escorted through the woods is actually the princess of Elenoir. Tessia casually admits she must have forgotten to mention her royal status to him during their journey. Shortly after, an ornate black and gold carriage arrives at the courtyard. Tessia's parents, King Alduin and Queen Mariel, rush over and pull their daughter into a tight, emotional hug. As they celebrate the reunion, Alduin spots Arthur standing nearby and angrily orders his royal guards to arrest the human trespasser. Virion steps in again, pointing out that Arthur saved Tessia's life and brought her home, so executing him on the spot is an extreme overreaction. Tessia throws a massive fit, crossing her arms and demanding her family show Arthur proper hospitality at the castle. Reluctantly, Alduin caves to his daughter's demands, and Tessia happily drags Arthur away by his hand to give him a grand tour. As they walk away, Virion senses an unfathomable and dangerous strength coming from the young boy, but he decides to keep his thoughts to himself for the time being. Tessia excitedly leads Arthur through the bustling elf city. Arthur takes in the sights of the massive tree trunks, the marketplace vendor stalls, and the white dome-shaped houses built right into the sides of giant mountain cliffs. They cross long wooden suspension bridges connecting the various platforms high above the lush green forest. Arthur observes the local elves and reflects on the deep historical hostility between humans and elves, realizing how incredibly rare it is for a human to see this unique civilization with his own eyes. However, he remains entirely on guard, remembering the intense chest pain he suffered earlier on the road. They eventually arrive at the Grand White Castle located at the base of a misty mountain. Inside the grand hall, rows of maids in blue and yellow dresses stand along a red carpet to warmly welcome Tessia back. Tessia wants to play and eat sweets with her new friend, but Virion insists they need to have a formal discussion first to understand exactly what happened during her disappearance. They all gather around a large wooden table in an ornate meeting room, complete with tea and pastries. Alduin, Muriel, and Virion sit across from Arthur, while Tessia happily snacks on a chocolate cake. Arthur formally introduces himself as Arthur Lewin from a humble town in the Sapin Kingdom. He knows he needs to act incredibly mature to be taken seriously by the royal family, so he carefully explains how he was separated from his parents during a bandit ambush and eventually stumbled upon Tessia. He tells them the truth about the events, but intentionally leaves out a few specific details about his own magical abilities and his past life. When Arthur mentions that slavers kidnapped Tessia, Alduin furiously slams his fist on the wooden table, utterly disgusted that human barbarians tried to sell his daughter. Arthur politely corrects the king, pointing out that slave trafficking is a profession, not a race-specific trait. Virion questions how a small child could possibly overcome armed adult slavers to rescue the princess. Arthur simply states that he is a sorcerer and used his magic to defeat the bad men. The royal guards standing nearby immediately draw their swords and accuse Arthur of spewing preposterous nonsense. They claim he must be a spy plotting to infiltrate the kingdom, but Virion sternly orders them to stand down. Tessia backs up Arthur's story completely, confirming that she was indeed captured by bad men who planned to sell her off. Alduin finally believes Arthur's story and asks what the boy wants as a reward for his deeds. Arthur states that his only wish is to return home to his family in Sapin. Alduin angrily refuses the request, stating that he will not show gratitude to a human given the bitter history and enmity between their two races. Arthur counters this with pure logic, explaining that if elves truly view humans as lowly savages, they should not stoop to that same debased level by refusing to repay a life debt. Alduin and Virion realize the boy makes a highly valid point and cannot argue against it. However, Alduin explains that the teleportation gate to the Sapin Kingdom is strictly reserved for the leaders of the three races and only opens once every 7 years for their joint council. Since the next meeting is still 5 years away, Arthur absolutely cannot use it. Instead, Alduin promises to provide an escort the following morning to guide Arthur back to the human lands safely on foot. Arthur thanks the king, feeling immensely relieved that he can finally go home. Suddenly, a sharp, agonizing pain shoots through Arthur's chest. He manages to hide his physical distress until the meeting completely ends. Later that night, Arthur stands completely shirtless under a cold, rushing waterfall near the castle, desperately trying to numb the worsening pain radiating from his manicore. He wonders what is happening to his body and wishes his former master, the dragon Sylvia, was there to help him figure it out. Exhausted from his training, he walks out onto a dark stone balcony built into the cliffside and looks up. He spots Tessia laughing and smiling with her parents on a higher platform above him. He deeply misses his own parents, Reynolds and Alice, and assumes they managed to escape the bandit attack safely. However, a wave of self-doubt creeps into his mind. He wonders if they will even be happy to see him again after he completely failed to protect them during the ambush. Tessia interrupts his brooding and sneaks up behind him on the balcony. She apologizes for her family's rude behavior during the meeting. Arthur brushes it off, telling her she should just go enjoy being a spoiled princess while she has the chance. Tessia gets defensive and asks if his parents will treat him the same way when he returns home. Her tone quickly shifts and she admits her own deep insecurities. She worries that her parents might secretly resent her because they went through so much trouble and got attacked by bandits all because of her wandering off. Arthur relates heavily to her fears, feeling completely useless for being unable to protect his own family from danger. Seeing him so depressed, Tessia suddenly steps forward, grabs his cheeks and aggressively squishes his face. She scolds him for being ridiculous and assures him that his parents are definitely extremely sad without him. She admits she is already sad about him leaving tomorrow, and he hasn't even left yet. Hundreds of glowing green bugs, which Tessia calls firefly pots, begin floating up from the dark abyss below the balcony. Arthur gazes at the beautiful floating lights and realizes he has been foolishly letting his past life's darkness wage war in his mind for no reason. He apologizes to Tessia, and the two enjoy the peaceful, glowing environment together. Out of nowhere, Virion lunges at Arthur from the shadows, launching a powerful, glowing green strike directly at the boy. Arthur instantly reacts to the danger, dodging the attack and countering with a swift punch surrounded by green energy. Virion easily blocks the strike and laughs out loud, revealing that the entire attack was just a trick to test Arthur's combat reflexes. Virion notes that Arthur's instant defense proves he really did fight and defeat those slavers. Tessia aggressively yells at her grandfather for nearly killing them, but Virion simply brushes her off, stating that he hasn't taken an interest in someone like this in a very long time. He tosses Arthur a wooden sword and officially initiates a second round of combat. They clash aggressively under the white stone archways of the courtyard. Arthur uses his mana to keep his physical movements as sharp and direct as possible, but Virion is incredibly fast and easily dodges every single swing. As they trade heavy blows, Arthur realizes he needs to push his limits even further to keep up with the former king. He manages to land a solid strike directly on Virion's chest, but his wooden sword completely shatters into pieces upon impact. Unarmed, Arthur channels raw, violent mana into his fist, surrounding his arm in a fiery red aura. He taps into the pure survival instincts from his past life as a king and unleashes a massive, swirling blast of green, yellow, and red energy straight at Virion. When the thick smoke finally clears, Arthur lands back on his feet on the stone floor, completely out of breath. Virion rubs his forehead, clearly impressed that the young boy actually managed to land a hit on him. Tessia runs over, grabs Virion from behind, and scolds him for bullying Arthur. Virion laughs it off and turns his full attention back to Arthur. He formally offers to take the boy as his personal apprentice. Arthur is genuinely shocked by the prestigious offer, but respectfully declines. He explains that his parents still don't know he is alive, and he needs to return home to them immediately to ease their worries. Virion counters this by suggesting he actually knows a way to let Arthur's parents know he is safe and sound. Before Arthur can ask for more details, an agonizing, unbearable pain explodes in his chest once again. He collapses hard onto the stone floor, tightly clutching his heart and sweating profusely in distress. Virion stands tall over him and calmly states that Arthur has inherited a powerful beast will. The immense, uncontrolled power is slowly tearing his young body apart from the inside. Virion looks down at the suffering boy and firmly tells him that he has absolutely no choice but to become his apprentice, because if he refuses the training, the beast will is going to kill him. Deep inside his mind, Arthur is trapped in a terrifying nightmare where a towering monster made of swirling purple and blue mist looms over him with glowing red eyes and a wide, sinister grin. He lies on the ground, clutching his chest in agony as magical flames erupt from his torn shirt. He clenches his teeth, wondering if this menacing creature represents his deep anxiety or the heavy weight of his responsibilities before he finally wakes up covered in cold sweat. He barely has a moment to catch his breath when Tessia suddenly jumps right onto his chest. She smiles brightly and tells him to wake up because her grandfather is waiting for them to start their trip. Arthur groans, hiding his face in his pillow, and jokingly begs the nightmare monster to give him 5 more minutes of sleep. This instantly makes Tessia angry because she assumes he is calling her a monster. She starts pulling forcefully on his arms, nagging him to get out of bed and pointing out his messy hair. Arthur rubs his head tiredly and retorts that she looked just like Medusa a second ago. As Arthur takes off his shirt to change, Tessia watches him and asks if he has actually decided to stay in the Elf Kingdom for good. Arthur admits he is still not entirely sure, but thinks he will have a solid answer after their upcoming journey. He casually refers to her as Princess again, which makes Tessia absolutely furious. She blushes in anger, yells at him to call her by her actual name, and threatens to get really mad if he uses that royal title one more time. Arthur smirks, noting that she already looks angry, and asks her to leave the room so he can finish getting dressed. Outside the Grand Palace, King Alduin is entirely unhappy about the situation. He argues with Varian, insisting that letting a human stay in their kingdom goes against all their sacred traditions and that taking Arthur on this trip is a terrible idea. Varian calmly dismisses his son's concerns, stating that he simply took a liking to the boy and that is all the reason he needs. Tessia fiercely defends Arthur, reminding her father that the human boy saved her life from the bandits, but the king tells her to stay out of adult matters. Varian decides he has heard enough arguing and tells the kids to get into the carriage. They board a luxurious black and gold carriage pulled by a massive armored beast and leave the city walls behind. During the long ride through the misty forest, Tessia gets tired and falls completely asleep, resting her head comfortably on Arthur's shoulder. Varian watches them and notes how incredibly relaxed Arthur is around him, especially since the boy casually calls him Grandpa. Arthur jokes that he might have to change his attitude depending on how this trip actually goes, and Varian likes his bold confidence. Varian then explains that Tessia woke up incredibly early because she was so anxious to find out what would happen to Arthur. He tells Arthur that being the sole heir to the throne has forced Tessia to live a very isolated life, dealing constantly with superficial friends who only care about her royal status. Because of that pain, she usually keeps her emotional walls up and refuses to let anyone get close to her heart. However, Varian points out that when Tessia is around Arthur, she smiles naturally, showing a genuine happiness he has not seen from her in a very long time. Varian reaches out to gently touch his sleeping granddaughter's cheek and sincerely thanks Arthur for bringing that joy back into her life. Arthur listens quietly and realizes that Varian is a man he can truly trust, seeing as the former king is willing to show genuine gratitude to a mere human child. After a long journey, Tessia slowly wakes up, rubbing her eyes and asking if they are there yet. The ornate carriage arrives at a rustic stone house built right into a hillside, surrounded by giant trees. Varian steps up to the green and brown wooden door and kicks it loudly, yelling for his old friend to open up. An elderly elf woman with long gray hair named Rinia slides the door open and immediately yells back at him for being a loud old bastard. Varian introduces her to Arthur as a sorcerer with highly unique skills. Arthur realizes that her magic must fall outside the standard 4 elements, just like his mother's rare healing abilities. Rinia invites them inside her cozy home, which is completely packed with wooden bookshelves, ancient texts, and magical artifacts. She sets up a large wooden basin filled with water on the table. Arthur politely asks how exactly she plans to help him contact his parents. Rinia smiles and reveals that she is a diviner. She mentions that Arthur is a very special child because there is something about him that blocks her from seeing his complete past and future. But she already knows he is here to let his parents know he is safe. She instructs Arthur to look closely into the water and focus his mind on his parents, picturing them with as much detail as possible to establish the connection. Arthur closes his eyes and visualizes his mother's chestnut hair, her warm personality, and the way her thin eyebrows press together when she worries. He then pictures his father's piercing blue eyes and his charismatic leadership. The magical water ripples with a bright green glow, showing a vision of Arthur's parents sitting at their wooden dining table. It is Arthur's birthday, and his pregnant mother serves a pot of his favorite stew. They both look incredibly depressed. Arthur sees a flashback of the day he fell off the cliff, watching his mother scream in pure agony while his father collapsed on the grass in tears. He watches his father's old party member strike him out of frustration, screaming that it is his fault for letting Arthur die, before the grief-stricken family travels back to their hometown in a wagon. Seeing how much pain they are in, Arthur finally speaks up through the magical connection. His parents jump up in absolute shock when they hear his voice and see his face floating inside a green magical barrier right in their dining room. Arthur quickly assures them that he is alive and currently staying safely with the elves in the kingdom of Elenoir. He explains that he is using a highly special spell to communicate. However, he tells them he cannot return home right away because there is something wrong with his body that requires specific, intense treatment. He begs them not to worry, promising it is nothing life-threatening and that he will come back as soon as he is completely healed. He also demands that they stop blaming themselves for the bandit attack, stating he would have made the exact same choice to protect them even if it meant dying. His parents break down crying tears of immense relief and joy, simply happy to know their son is still out there. Arthur tells them he loves them before the spell inevitably fades away. Overwhelmed by deep emotion, Arthur cries silently at the wooden table, swearing to himself that he will get stronger so his family never has to worry about him ever again. He wipes his tears, turns to Varian, and respectfully asks the old man to take him as his official apprentice. Back at the massive royal palace, Tessia angrily argues with her parents in a grand hall. She refuses to back down, yelling that Arthur saved her life twice and that kicking him out would make the entire elf kingdom look like ungrateful cowards to the outside world. The king looks highly stressed and unsure of what to do, but Virion steps in and firmly declares that Arthur will be under his direct tutelage, offering to take full responsibility for whatever the boy does. Faced with his father's absolute authority and his daughter's relentless demands, the king has no other choice but to agree. Later, in the grand hall decorated with golden pillars, the king officially approaches Arthur and offers a sincere apology. He admits that sitting on the throne for so long has made him stubborn and formally welcomes Arthur to treat the palace as his own home. The queen warmly echoes the sentiment, wanting Arthur to feel comfortable. Arthur realizes the king is just a massive softie when it comes to his daughter, and completely folds under Virion's pressure. Before things can get too formal and boring, Tessia grabs Arthur and demands they go play outside so she can finally show him around the city. They head down to a bustling marketplace filled with massive white banners, crowded canvas stalls, and beautiful waterfalls built directly into the cliffs. Tessia happily holds Arthur's hand and leads him through the massive crowds, excited to take him to a popular bazaar that sells tasty fruit and sweets. As they rush through the market, Arthur accidentally bumps into a smug, blonde-haired elf boy named Ferrith. Ferrith looks completely disgusted, dramatically brushing himself off and accusing Arthur of infecting him with disgusting human germs. The arrogant noble boy loudly questions why a human monkey is allowed in their sacred city, riling up the nearby crowd to hurl insults at Arthur. Tessia tells Arthur to ignore the predictable little pest, but Arthur just smirks, feeling a sudden urge to cause some mischief. Ferrith acts politely toward Tessia, recognizing her royal status, but continues to talk down to Arthur like he is garbage. Deciding to play along, Arthur uses heavy sarcasm to mock Ferrith, pretending to be absolutely mind-blown that he is standing in the presence of an absolute genius from the prestigious Ivesar family. He bows dramatically and loudly promises to show the utmost respect to such an incredible being. Tessia giggles at the joke while they walk away, but Ferrith quickly realizes he is being heavily made fun of. Furious, he demands they stop and officially challenges Arthur to a duel on the pride of his family name. He points his purple wand right at Arthur, calling him a coward and forcing him into a corner, claiming that running away will directly insult Virion's honor as his teacher. Arthur remains completely unbothered but calmly accepts the challenge, and Tessia agrees to officiate the match. A large crowd of elves gathers around the clearing to watch the human fight the noble. Ferrith confidently tells Arthur to say his prayers before launching himself into the air and firing explosive magical arrows from his wand. Arthur calmly stands his ground, letting the magical blasts hit the dirt around him. Before Ferrith even realizes what is happening, Arthur closes the distance in a flash and delivers a brutal, lightning-fast punch straight to the noble's face. The massive impact sends Ferrith flying completely across the marketplace. He crashes onto the cobblestone path, completely knocked out with a giant purple bruise on his cheek. The crowd stands in stunned silence at the brutal display. Arthur looks down at his fist and casually wonders if he hit the kid too hard. Tessia is absolutely thrilled by the quick victory. She grabs Arthur's hand with a massive smile, and the two of them run away laughing joyfully, leaving the unconscious noble lying in the dirt for everyone to see. Over the next few days, Arthur completely immerses himself in the elven culture, spending his time eating various snacks, reading ancient books in the Grand Library, and checking out local weapon shops with Tessia by his side. They stand on a high stone balcony overlooking the entire Suspension Bridge village, and Tessia asks if he is looking forward to his intense training starting tomorrow. Arthur thinks back to a highly serious conversation he had with Virion in the Dark Forest. Virion had sternly warned him that the beast tamer training was often compared to being dipped into boiling pitch, and that it would require absolute daily diligence to survive. Despite the terrifying warning, Arthur had confidently accepted, stating he was completely ready to endure whatever it took to fix his mana core and gain true power. Back on the balcony, Arthur smiles and tells Tessia that he is genuinely excited because he is finally taking control of his own future. Hearing his sheer determination, Tessia pumps her fists in the air and loudly declares that she is going to train just as hard so she can stand on equal footing with him. They laugh together and immediately head off to eat more food. The following day, Arthur's grueling training officially begins. He meets Virion deep in a lush canyon filled with ancient stone platforms and glowing blue gems. Arthur knows the path ahead will be filled with intense trials, but he is fully ready to face them. He sits alone in the dark, absorbing floating orbs of pure magical energy to forcefully stabilize his broken core. Later, he engages in fierce physical combat with Virion in a white stone courtyard. They lunge at each other with wooden practice swords, trading incredibly fast blows. Arthur pushes his body to the absolute limit, moving with blinding speed as he tries to land a hit on his incredibly skilled mentor. Even though the training is brutally exhausting, Arthur simply smiles, knowing that the years ahead are going to be incredibly exciting. 3 full years pass in the absolute blink of an eye, and Arthur grows significantly taller and stronger from his relentless training. Deep in the forest, a much older Tessia complains about how long Arthur is taking during their sparring match. Suddenly, a massive burst of magic erupts from the trees. Tessia yells at Arthur for actually using his mana and demands he be a little more gentle, but Arthur simply smirks, fully stepping into his newfound power. Arthur and Tessia stand on a balcony and watch the golden carriage carry the king and queen away for a meeting. Shortly after, Tessia brings Arthur a massive hamburger she made herself. She demands that he eat the entire thing and tells him to be grateful because a beautiful girl prepared it. Arthur happily takes a huge bite and smugly teases her by questioning her claim about being beautiful, which instantly flusters her and makes her yell. They head out to a dense forest clearing to continue their training with Virion. Arthur stands back and watches as Tessia furiously attacks training posts with her wooden sword, throwing high and low kicks to burn off her anger. She lunges right at Arthur, but Virion casually steps in and stops them. He notes they are sufficiently warmed up and tosses them their wooden swords. Tessia grabs hers and aggressively promises to clobber Arthur. Virion then starts a detailed review of sorcery. He explains that stabilizing mana is the ultimate foundation of magic and allows a person to master fire, water, wind, or earth. He notes that a person's magic type depends entirely on their race. Elves naturally specialize in wind, water, and earth. Dwarves are stronger with earth and fire. Humans are highly unique because they can potentially use all 4 elements. However, Virion clarifies that due to individual compatibility, most people only ever master one element. Arthur raises his hand and asks why he hasn't been allowed to use sorcery during his physical training. Virion explains that a powerful beast Will is currently slumbering deep inside Arthur's mana core. This beast will constantly upsets the delicate balance between his physical body and his mana core, directly causing the intense pain Arthur frequently experiences. Virion reveals he suspects the beast will belongs to a dragon. He explains this is why their first training step was to force Arthur's mana to completely assimilate with his physical body. Arthur and Tessia resume their sparring match. Tessia swings her glowing green sword fiercely, and Arthur blocks her strikes until she knocks him backward onto the mossy ground. Virion steps in and announces they are going to forcefully awaken. The beast will inside Arthur right now. He promises that if this procedure works, Arthur will never have to worry about the chest pain ever again and will become a true beast tamer. Arthur quickly agrees. Virion gathers glowing golden magic in his hand and tells Arthur he is going to ignite his mana core. Tessia looks extremely worried and asks if the process is safe, but Virion confidently assures her Arthur will only feel a little bit of heat. Arthur kneels on the ground, and Virion strikes him hard in the stomach before placing his glowing hand directly on Arthur's chest. A blinding burst of golden magical energy erupts from Arthur's body, completely engulfing the entire forest. Arthur screams in sheer agony as the intense energy shreds his shirt and blasts sharp wooden stakes outward across the ground. Virion is entirely stunned by the massive explosion and yells out in confusion. Sometime later, Arthur wakes up in bed. He looks around in a daze and sees Virion sitting quietly on a chair next to him. Virion asks how he feels and questions if Arthur knows where his beast will actually came from. Arthur confirms that the will came directly from a dragon named Sylvia. Virion is heavily shocked by the revelation but accepts it based on the massive explosion. He strictly orders Arthur to never tell anyone about the dragon, warning that possessing a dragon's will is guaranteed to attract highly dangerous conflict. Virion then shifts the topic and informs Arthur that his departure is officially scheduled for 4 months from now. Arthur is completely caught off guard, explaining he thought he had 2 full years left. Virion explains that the 3 kingdoms are organizing a major cultural exchange event in Xyrus City for young people, and the entrance to the city will be open for its duration. He mentions this event is the exact reason why the king and queen left the palace earlier. Virion warns Arthur that his training is going to get significantly harder starting tomorrow, and tells him to get some rest. That night, Arthur lies in his dark room looking at the glowing, multicolored orb resting on his pillow. He feels anxious about leaving in just 4 months and stares intently at the stone he received from Sylvia. Suddenly, the orb starts forming dark, jagged cracks across its surface. Arthur panics, sweating profusely as he realizes the stone is actually an egg. The egg shatters completely, scattering glowing shards all over the bed. A small black creature with tiny horns, bat wings, and a star-tipped tail emerges from the broken shell. The baby dragon smiles joyfully at Arthur. He carefully picks the creature up and smiles back, completely mesmerized by how cute it is. The baby dragon suddenly opens its mouth wide and playfully bites Arthur's hand. Arthur yells in pain, and a glowing purple magical crest instantly manifests on his arm. He hears a voice in his head and realizes the baby dragon is communicating with him telepathically. He decides to name the dragon Sylvie, after her mother. Sylvie happily accepts the name and curls up next to him on the bed. Arthur examines the purple crest on his arm, notes the mark is highly significant, and peacefully falls asleep next to his new companion. The next morning, Tessia quietly peeks into Arthur's room and finds him sleeping with Sylvie. Arthur wakes up and stretches his arms. Tessia immediately picks Sylvie up and gushes over how adorable she is. Later, Arthur and Tessia take Sylvie out to the forest to show her to Virion. Sylvie perches happily on Arthur's head. Virion turns around and is absolutely speechless when he sees the tiny black creature. He instantly recognizes it as a dragon and yells that the massive shock is going to give him a heart attack. Sylvie jumps down, and Tessia excitedly pets her. Virion calms down and deduces the egg must have hatched the moment Arthur fully assimilated the beast will. He advises Arthur to tell everyone Sylvie is a rare mana beast, so nobody gets suspicious. Virion then declares it is time to begin the day's actual training. He tells Arthur that as a newly awakened beast tamer, he must learn to exercise his beast core and his mana core simultaneously in combat. Suddenly, Virion's entire body dissolves into a dark, swirling green aura. Tessia covers her face in distress as the aura consumes the clearing. Arthur crosses his arms defensively and cowers in fear as a massive, shadowy figure with glowing yellow eyes emerges from the black smoke. The terrifying shadow monster grabs Arthur's shoulder with a giant claw. Arthur is completely paralyzed by fear and frantically looks around, unable to sense Virion's presence anywhere. He quickly surrenders, admitting the horrifying look of the monster is going to traumatize him. Virion drops the transformation and appears behind Arthur. He explains he used the Shadow Panther Beast Will, which grants him instinctive control over wind and neutralizes all sound. This advanced sorcery makes him completely undetectable, though he admits it is heavily exhausting to use. Over the next few days, Arthur aggressively trains to master his new beast will. He meditates in the forest with Tessia, Virion, and Sylvie. By combining his physical conditioning with his magical assimilation, the intense pain he previously felt in his chest completely vanishes. His body grows remarkably stronger, allowing him to easily withstand the previously unbearable training exercises. During a fierce sparring match, Arthur tightly grips his wooden sword, infusing it with vibrant red energy. He strikes the dark shadow figure created by Virion with a powerful diagonal slash, completely defeating the construct in a single hit. When Arthur has free time, he plays board games with Tessia, easily beating her and making her cry in frustration. Later, they walk through a crowded, festive city street decorated with colorful banners. They run into Faerith, the smug blonde elf boy. Faerith immediately points an accusing finger at Arthur and starts yelling. He claims Arthur used unsporting tactics to defeat him in a previous duel and aggressively challenges him to a rematch. Faerith shouts so hard that he loses his balance and falls flat on the stone path. Arthur casually reaches out, grabs Faerith by the tunic and pulls him up. He smiles warmly and completely diffuses the tension by shaking Faerith's hand. Faerith blushes in embarrassment but accepts the handshake. Faerith then mentions he is attending the upcoming cultural exchange in Zyra City as an official goodwill ambassador. He turns to Tessia and condescendingly asks if she is going as well, calling her a delicate princess who shouldn't get lost again. The insult completely enrages Tessia. She unleashes a massive punch that launches Faerith and her own pink hat high into the blue sky. Faerith crashes back onto the pavement with a giant red mark on his face, totally knocked out. Arthur quickly pulls Tessia away from the scene and scolds her for slugging a subject in public. Tessia gets highly defensive and argues she is upset because Arthur gets to go home while she cannot even join the cultural exchange. She accuses Arthur of acting like an angry old man and runs away in tears. Later that night, Arthur tracks Tessia down to her room. He stands outside her open window holding glowing green fireflies and watches her cry on her bed. He gently invites her to sneak out to the woods with him. They walk side by side down a dark forest path and set up a small campfire in a grassy field under a starry night sky. A menacing tree monster with glowing pink eyes appears in the dark forest and scares her. Arthur laughs and asks if she is still scared of ghosts, but Tessia loudly denies it. She changes the subject and asks Arthur what the human kingdom is like. Arthur admits he doesn't really know since he never got the chance to explore it. Tessia quietly asks if Arthur could just stay here in the elf kingdom with her instead of leaving. Before Arthur can formulate an answer, he sees that Tessia has completely fallen asleep by the warm fire. Eventually, the day of Arthur's departure finally arrives. Arthur packs his large backpack and gets ready to leave the palace. Virion hands him a golden pocket watch that functions as a compass, featuring the Aerolith family seal. Virion explains the compass will help Arthur ensure he never gets lost again and will be very useful when he decides to return. Arthur thanks Virion for the gift and promises not to overdo it with his dangerous late-night strolls. A large group of travelers, including Virion and Ferrith, gathers on a grand stone stairway leading up to the massive gates of Xyrus City. The giant gateway is flanked by two towering hooded statues and glows with intense vertical green lines. As the crowd waits, Tessia suddenly runs down the paved stone walkway calling out Arthur's name. She stops in front of him, looking incredibly sad. Arthur smiles warmly with Sylvie perched on his shoulder. He takes Tessia's hand and strictly tells her to eat properly and avoid wandering around by herself. Tessia nods and agrees. Arthur then pulls her into a tight, affectionate hug, telling her he will genuinely miss her. Tessia closes her eyes, tears streaming down her face, and hugs him back, saying she will miss him too. The massive stone gateway finally opens, releasing a blinding white light, and Arthur confidently walks through with the rest of the travelers. Arthur approaches the grand doorway of a stately building and is immediately spotted by his parents. His father, Reynolds, and his mother, Alice, stare at him in complete disbelief. They can hardly process that he is actually standing right in front of them. Arthur confirms that he has finally returned home. Reynolds and Alice rush forward and pull him into a massive hug. They cry tears of joy as they embrace their missing son. A young girl watches them from the side. She strictly tells her mother to stop crying. Reynolds turns to Arthur and tells him to take his mother and run. Arthur remembers the traumatic bandit attack from years ago. He recalls telling his father that he was already strong enough to fight with them. Adam Crench had told him to use that strength to protect his mother instead. Then someone mentioned that Alice was going to have another baby. Arthur realizes that the little girl standing in front of him is that very same baby. Arthur kneels down and introduces himself to Eleanor, telling her his full name. Alice gently explains to Eleanor that Arthur is her big brother. Eleanor is incredibly surprised to hear this. They all head inside to catch up. Alice asks Arthur how he feels and wonders if he is fully cured of the sickness he mentioned in his message. Arthur assures her he is fine now. Alice worries that he looks too skinny and asks if he has been eating properly. Arthur confirms he has been eating well. Reynolds jokingly accuses Alice of interrogating the boy the moment he gets home. Alice apologizes and calls Eleanor over to the couch. She reminds Eleanor about all the bedtime stories they used to share about her big brother. Eleanor is still shocked that Arthur is actually real. Arthur tells Eleanor he is incredibly happy to finally meet her. Eleanor excitedly picks up the small black dragon, Sylvie, from Arthur's lap. Arthur explains to his parents that he told them everything that happened once things settled down, but he intentionally left out the part where he met the dragon Sylvia. He explained his survival from the cliff fall as a combination of luck and subconscious magic. He also told them how he met Tessia and recovered in the Elven Kingdom. Arthur feels guilty about lying to his parents, but he knows telling them the whole truth before becoming stronger poses way too much of a risk. Reynolds asks about the small black creature. Arthur lies and claims he found a dying mana beast nest during his travels. He says he could not save the mother, so he decided to take the baby in and named her Sylvie. Eleanor happily plays with the tiny dragon. Reynolds says he is just glad Arthur is healthy. He then eagerly asks Arthur what stage his mana core is currently at. Alice scolds Reynolds for asking about magic right after their son returns home, but Reynolds insists there is no harm in comparing their growth. Arthur asks Reynolds what he has been doing lately. Reynolds proudly reveals he got a job at the Helsty auction house working as the instructor for their security team. He brags that he recently hit the deep orange stage of his mana core. The color of mana goes from black to red, orange, yellow, silver, and finally white, with each color having 3 stages. Arthur knows that since his father is an augmenter, hitting deep orange implies he has put in a massive amount of physical training. Arthur acts impressed, and then casually reveals that his own mana core is already at the light red stage. Reynolds is completely devastated to hear that his 8-year-old son has almost caught up to his power level. He curses loudly in frustration. Alice scolds him for swearing in front of Eleanor. Eleanor immediately repeats the swear word, proving Alice's point. Reynolds gets highly competitive and demands they head to the backyard to spar right now. At that moment, Vincent Helstia, Tabitha, and their daughter Lilia walk into the room. Vincent is Reynolds' boss and the owner of the auction house. Vincent is completely shocked to see that Reynolds' son is actually alive. Reynolds introduces Arthur to the Helstia family. Arthur bows politely and greets them. Vincent is thoroughly impressed by Arthur's perfect manners. Alice introduces Lilia and hopes the two kids can become friends. Lilia asks to pet Sylvie, and Arthur happily lets her. Alice mentions that they are currently living in Vincent's house, so it is good they introduce themselves before making a mess. Vincent is confused about making a mess until Reynolds explains they are about to spar in the rear garden. Vincent panics. Everyone heads outside to the massive green lawn. Vincent asks Alice if Reynolds was joking about Arthur having a light red mana core. Alice admits she was shocked too, but Arthur is a fast learner. Vincent points out that Arthur awakened his core at just 3 years old and has already progressed through 3 stages. He notes that even the top prodigies at Cyrus Academy are barely able to reach deep red. Arthur keeps quiet, knowing he actually had to limit his progress to light red because he was busy assimilating Sylvia's beast will. Reynolds stretches his arms and warns Arthur that he is much tougher than he used to be. Arthur replies that he is stronger too. They instantly charge at each other. Reynolds slides across the grass with incredible speed. Arthur matches his pace and slides forward to meet him. They engage in a fierce hand-to-hand brawl. Arthur easily deflects a heavy punch from his father. Reynolds follows up with a high kick, but Arthur blocks that as well. Reynolds throws another powerful punch, and Arthur intercepts it perfectly. Arthur then tries to strike back, but Reynolds catches his fist. Reynolds tells him that his attacks are not quite strong enough and he needs to try harder. Arthur lunges forward again with a determined look. He throws a straight punch, but Reynolds effortlessly deflects it and sends Arthur flying through the air. Arthur recovers mid-air, flips, and delivers a downward kick. Reynolds blocks the kick. They exchange a rapid series of close-range blows. Arthur slides backward across the grass to create some distance. Reynolds smiles proudly and admits that Arthur actually managed to catch him off guard for a second. However, Reynolds announces that he is finally going to get serious. A massive, bright yellow explosion erupts around Reynolds. He stands on the field with his left arm completely engulfed in intense flames. He tells Arthur to consider himself warned. Arthur stays focused. He remembers the fundamental rules of sorcery in this world. Conjurers are able to easily learn which element they are compatible with and then master it. Augmenters, on the other hand, have a much harder time figuring out their elemental affinity and have to put in a lot of effort to realize it. Arthur compares this magic system to the concept of Ki from his past life. In his previous life, Ki was a life force that a person had complete control over. He remembers fighting enemies in his past life using this Ki. The lack of an inborn elemental affinity means an augmenter has to work much harder, but the physical rewards are significantly greater. Arthur feels that this makes his past life Ki training highly comparable to the augmenter training in this world. He knows that his memories of using Ki combined with his extensive training with Virion have given him a massive advantage. Arthur decides it is time to get serious as well. He unleashes a massive explosion of yellow and green energy from his body. The intense aura radiates from Arthur as he stands his ground. Alice, Lilia, and Vincent watch from the stone steps in absolute shock. Reynolds stands engulfed in his vibrant orange flames, ready for the clash. Arthur charges forward, leaving green motion streaks behind him. He closes the distance in an instant and throws a devastating punch straight at his father. The impact creates a massive, blinding explosion of golden and green light that completely fills the sky. The sheer force of the blow knocks Reynolds backward. Arthur slides across the green grass on his hand and feet, digging into the dirt to bring himself to a halt. He stands up on the grassy hillside, totally unharmed by the fiery collision. He reflects on how his past life experiences made his training with Virion so incredibly effective. Arthur then remembers a specific training session with Virion in the Elf Forest. Virion had praised Arthur for improving so much with the fire element and suggested they push beyond it. Arthur had asked what could possibly be beyond fire magic. In response, Arthur had focused his energy and emitted a blinding golden light from his hand. He had managed to surround his entire body with powerful, crackling arcs of golden electrical magic. He had successfully unlocked the lightning element. Back in the present, Reynolds decides to escalate the fight. He summons a massive, swirling blaze of intense yellow fire that takes the shape of a giant dragon. He unleashes his advanced fire magic. Alice, Lilia, and Vincent watch in sheer terror. However, Arthur is not worried at all. He smiles confidently as white electrical energy begins to crackle and swirl all around his body. He reaches his hand out toward a nearby stone fountain. The flowing water of the fountain instantly freezes into a massive, jagged structure of glowing blue ice. Vincent is completely bewildered and screams that using water elemental magic should be impossible for Arthur. Reynolds leaps right through the giant ice structure, engulfed in his fiery aura. The fiery orange energy directly collides with the glowing blue ice particles in a spectacular display of magic. After the intense clash, Reynolds playfully grabs Arthur in a headlock and laughs heartily. He tells Arthur that his magic was absolutely incredible. He asks Arthur when and how he learned to do all of that, and what else he is capable of doing. Arthur casually explains that he learned it all pretty recently. though he admits he can still barely control the more advanced magic. Eleanor watches them from the side and asks her father if he is okay. Alice strictly tells Eleanor not to run around and to be careful. Vincent is still reeling from the magical display. He declares that Arthur is a genuine prodigy and immediately needs a drink to calm his nerves. Later that evening, everyone gathers in the Hellstaius' grand hall for a large dinner. They sit around a long wooden table. Vincent asks Reynolds if he truly understands exactly how promising Arthur's future is right now. Reynolds proudly states that he has known his son was special ever since his manicore awakened at just 3 years old. Vincent is absolutely floored to hear that Arthur awakened at 3. Alice chimes in and adds that Arthur completely blew apart their old house during his awakening. Vincent asks if that was the real reason their house was destroyed. Reynolds just laughs off the memory. Vincent then proposes a serious idea. He suggests enrolling Arthur in Xyrus Academy. Arthur is slightly surprised by the suggestion. Reynolds is completely shocked, pointing out that Xyrus Academy is the most prestigious magic academy on the entire continent. Tabitha agrees with her husband's idea. Vincent explains that considering Arthur's unbelievable potential, he and Tabitha would be more than happy to invest in his future. He formally offers to pay for Arthur's entire tuition, so Reynolds and Alice will not have to worry about the cost. Alice is incredibly grateful for their kindness, but she expresses deep concern. She points out that Arthur is only 8 years old, and she is not sure the academy would even accept someone that young. Vincent confidently reveals that he is actually good friends with the director of Xyrus Academy through his auction house work. He promises that if he talks to the director directly, he can easily get Arthur admitted. Before Vincent can finish his sentence, Arthur politely interrupts him. Arthur thanks Vincent for the generous offer, but he firmly states that he has not seen his family in a very long time. He makes it clear that he wants to spend time with them right now, not get shipped off to a magic school. Vincent quickly apologizes and admits he got a little too far ahead of himself. Arthur adds that the intense sparring match wore him out more than he expected, so he asks to be excused for the night. Arthur leaves the dining hall and begins walking down a massive hallway. He wonders to himself if he should have kept his mouth shut during dinner. Suddenly, Lilia calls out to him. She warns him that if he keeps walking that way, he will end up getting lost in the basement. Arthur turns around and sees her standing there. Lilia smiles and tells him to follow her because she knows the perfect spot to hang out. She leads him into a cozy kitchen area. Lilia happily announces to the staff that they have a guest. The elderly maid, Maria, greets Lilia and jokingly asks Arthur if he is the boy who torched the garden she spends so much time maintaining. Arthur quickly apologizes for the mess he made during the spar. Lilia tells him not to worry because Maria is just poking fun at him. Arthur is surprised by how talkative Lilia is now, noting that she barely said a single word earlier. Lilia ignores him and eagerly asks the staff if they have any leftover duck, specifically requesting the fatty pieces. A mustached butler warns Lilia to be mindful of what she eats, reminding her that her mother was recently upset about her gaining weight. Lilia gets defensive and states that they agreed never to discuss her weight. She proudly claims that she is just a healthy, growing girl. She blissfully cuts into a plate of sliced meat while Arthur and the maids watch her. Maria quietly explains to Arthur that Lilia always comes to the kitchen to eat whenever she is feeling stressed out. Arthur is confused and asks why a young girl would be stressed. Maria explains that Vincent and Tabitha desperately want Lilia to awaken as a sorcerer, even though neither of them possesses any magical abilities themselves. Lilia also wants to become a sorcerer, but Maria notes that it places an enormous amount of pressure on such a young child. Arthur watches Lilia eat and realizes how difficult her situation must be. Later that night, Arthur goes to his bedroom. Reynolds and Alice come in to tuck him in. Alice sits on the bed and tells Arthur that she still cannot believe he is actually back home with them. She affectionately notes how grown up and handsome he looks now. She tells him that no matter how much his appearance has changed, he is still their beloved son on the inside. Arthur asks if he really looks that different, but Alice assures him he is still the exact same smart and kind boy she always knew. Reynolds places his hand on Arthur's shoulder and proudly states that knowing his son will become the strongest sorcerer in the world is only the second best news he received today. The best news was simply having him back. Alice then brings up Vincent's offer regarding Xyrus Academy. She tells Arthur that Vincent only made the offer out of genuine concern for his future, so he shouldn't be offended. Arthur smiles brightly and promises he knows the Hellstaius did not mean anything bad by it. Alice wishes him a good night, and they leave him to rest. The next morning, Arthur wakes up and runs downstairs with Sylvie perched happily on his shoulder. When he reaches the bottom floor, he is completely shocked to see his former adventuring party, the Twin Horns, waiting for him. Angela Rose immediately rushes forward and crushes Arthur in a massive, suffocating hug. She cries out that she is so relieved he is safe and missed him terribly. Arthur struggles to breathe in her tight grip. Durden Walker waves and notes that Arthur has gotten much bigger than he remembers. Arthur high-fives the giant conjurer and agrees. Adam Crench jokingly complains that everyone was supposed to keep smiling for Arthur's sake, but Jasmine Flamesworth is already crying. He also points out that no one seems to care about the Black Mana Beast sitting on Arthur's shoulder. Helen Shard tells Arthur to just ignore Adam. Jasmine steps forward with tears in her red eyes. She kneels down, hugs Arthur tightly, and completely breaks down. She apologizes profusely for her mistake years ago, begging Arthur to forgive her for letting him fall off the cliff. Arthur gently comforts her. Adam and Helen watch from the hallway and agree that they do not need to step in and stop the emotional reunion. After calming down, the entire group moves into the living room and sits around a wooden coffee table. Arthur is surprised to learn that the Twin Horns traveled all the way from Etistan City just to see him. Helen explains that the pay they received made the long trip absolutely worthwhile. Adam complains that Helen was the only one who had any trouble on the journey. Angela explains that they took a few side jobs on their way back and ended up visiting a bunch of new places they had never seen before. Adam completely dismisses the sights, claiming everywhere they went looked exactly the same. Helen calls Adam out, revealing that he spent the entire trip buying weird souvenirs at every single stop. Adam gets defensive and demands to know what the problem is. Helen mentions a specific item with a weird color, and Adam insists it wasn't weird at all. Angela agrees with Helen, calling the item gross. Adam pulls the strange souvenir out to show everyone, proudly claiming it is perfectly normal merchandise. Helen yells at him to put it away. Adam argues that becoming an adventurer to learn about the world is a great thing, but Helen points out that his souvenir is far too unique. Adam shouts that literally anyone would buy an item like that. Meanwhile, in another part of the manor, Lilia sits completely alone at a table. She stares blankly ahead and clenches her hands into tight fists, clearly overwhelmed by the immense pressure her parents are putting on her. Arthur is alone in his bedroom, sitting on the wooden floor and pushing his limits as he tries to master his magical abilities. A white-stitched ball floats down toward him, but he struggles to maintain his focus. Sweat rolls down his face as he pants heavily, realizing he can only hold his concentration for a few fleeting seconds. Exhausted, he collapses onto his back, spreading his arms wide on the floor. He questions if he is being too reckless and wonders if he should pursue a different training method. However, he quickly rejects the idea. He clenches his trembling hand into a tight fist, determined to master his power so he can defend everyone he loves. This is the entire reason he fought so hard to return home. Sylvie, his small black dragon, waddles over and sits beside his head. Arthur looks up at her and smiles, finally letting himself relax as he realizes he is actually back home. Sylvie quickly ruins the moment by telling Arthur that he completely reeks of sweat. Following her advice, Arthur takes Sylvie into the large bathroom and gives her a bath. He kneels beside a white clawfoot tub filled with pink bubbles, thoroughly scrubbing the squirming dragon. He warns her to stop moving so much because they cannot have her stinking up such a fancy mansion. As he washes her, Arthur marvels at the luxurious stone walls and lit candle sconces around them. He thinks about how much the Helstea family has benefited from running their highly successful auction house, imagining their beautiful garden fountains and massive feasts. Despite the wealthy surroundings, Arthur's mind drifts to Lilia. He knows her parents, Vincent and Tabitha, desperately want her to awaken as a sorcerer. The problem is that neither of them possesses any magical abilities, and their intense expectations are putting a massive amount of pressure on the young girl. Arthur wipes Sylvie down with a towel, watching her happily pop out from behind the bedsheets surrounded by sparkles, but he cannot shake his concern for Lilia's stressful situation. To get Arthur ready for the city, Alice takes him to a vibrant pink barbershop. A flamboyant, muscular barber with a heart-patterned headband happily gets to work, calling Arthur an unpolished gem. He promises to make the boy shine like a star and quickly trims his hair. Afterward, Alice dresses Arthur in a sharp new outfit. They meet up with Eleanor and Lilia in the sunny town square of Xyrus City. The girls are amazed by Arthur's neat appearance. Arthur feels a bit embarrassed and asks why he needs to dress up so much. Alice explains that the Helstea auction house is a massive attraction, drawing even disguised royalty, so they absolutely cannot have Arthur walking around looking shabby. Eleanor eagerly runs up to Arthur and demands that he escort her. Arthur smiles and gladly takes her hand. Lilia notes that Eleanor has been incredibly clingy ever since Arthur returned. Arthur figures his little sister just finds him novel because he showed up out of nowhere, and Eleanor cheerfully agrees. The group strolls down the cobblestone streets, admiring the market stalls and stone buildings decorated with red banners. Suddenly, a strange white rope ring magically appears and falls right onto Arthur's head. Arthur turns around in surprise and spots a group of arrogant older boys wearing white-collared uniforms adorned with crests. Alice warns Arthur that those boys are students from the prestigious Xyrus Magic Academy. Wearing that uniform practically makes someone royalty in this city, which explains their terrible attitudes. Arthur senses a strange energy coming from them but decides to ignore it for now. As they continue exploring, Arthur spots 3 vibrant gems displayed on pedestals inside a shop window. Alice explains that they are beast cores, which are magical magic cores taken directly from defeated mana beasts. These cores can heavily amplify the power of anyone who holds them. Arthur is completely shocked to learn that beast cores can simply be bought and sold in regular shops. Alice mentions that a core containing a beast can sell for over 100 gold coins. Arthur realizes that amount of money could fund someone's life for 250 years back in his old world. Alice promises to arrange it so Arthur can check out the beast cores at the next auction, but Arthur insists he is already satisfied with the beast he currently has. Hearing this, Lilia begs her mother to buy one of the cheaper cores from a weapon store so she can try to awaken her magic. Alice firmly shuts her down, stating that buying an expensive core is not a shortcut to becoming a sorcerer. Lilia tries to argue, but Alice refuses to discuss it further. The group eventually sits down at an outdoor cafe to relax. Arthur notices Lilia sitting quietly, looking incredibly depressed. He realizes that Lilia's mother is not the one pressuring her, meaning her father's massive expectations must be causing all her stress. Arthur looks away for a brief moment, and when he turns back, Lilia is completely gone. He quickly leaves the cafe and tracks her down to a narrow alleyway. He follows her into a dimly lit armory filled with swords, shields, and suits of armor. He finds Lilia standing in front of a display case holding a red beast core. She mutters that she has enough allowance saved up to buy it. Arthur steps up and tells her that having a beast core does not guarantee she will be able to use magic. He reminds her that her mother already told her the exact same thing. Lilia snaps at him, yelling that she has tried everything else and does not care about one more failure. Arthur tries to calm her down, but Lilia shouts that he is special and completely fails to understand what she is going through. She cries that her parents will not even let her touch a core no matter how much she begs. Overwhelmed by her own jealousy and frustration, she collapses against Arthur's chest and cries, apologizing for lashing out. Before Arthur can comfort her, the 3 arrogant academy students from the street walk into the shop. The blue-haired leader instantly mocks Arthur and Lilia, trying to start a fight. He generates a ball of fire in his hand to intimidate them and tells them not to bother running away. Arthur steps protectively in front of Lilia, who grabs his jacket in fear. Ready to defend her, Arthur ignites his own intense flame in his hand and aggressively orders the students to release their full power right now. The shop owner quickly intervenes, shouting at the students from behind the counter. He warns them that starting a fight with the daughter of the Helstia family is a terrible idea, since they are massive donors to the academy. Hearing this, the students immediately panic. They realize the academy director would expel them if he found out, so they quickly back down. As they leave, the angry leader insults Arthur, calling him a useless shrimp trying to buy a spot at the school. Later that evening, the group returns to the Grand Mansion. Vincent paces nervously near the staircase, horrified that Arthur and Lilia almost got into a brawl with academy students. He assures them that his massive donations will keep the incident from affecting their future enrollment. However, Vincent casually suggests that he might just send Arthur to the academy instead of Lilia. Hearing this, Lilia completely breaks down. She believes her father is finally giving up on her because she cannot use magic and is replacing her with Arthur. She screams that she hates Vincent and Arthur, then turns and sprints out of the room. Vincent is absolutely stunned and feels terrible about the misunderstanding. A little while later, Arthur goes to find Lilia and stands outside a large wooden door. He walks into the stone-walled room and finds Lilia looking incredibly sad. Lilia apologizes for her outburst, admitting she was terribly jealous that Arthur showed up out of nowhere with amazing powers and stole all her father's attention. She cries that it is her own fault for not awakening her magic and believes her parents are finally tired of dealing with her. Arthur recognizes the cold feeling of sinking into self-reproach and decides to step in. He gently cups Lilia's face with his hands and tells her he understands exactly how hard she is trying. He holds her hand and channels his mana, creating beautiful glowing green orbs of light between them. He explains that a girl he met while he was lost taught him about these lights, and they are his absolute favorite. He assures Lilia that her parents see her effort and only want her to be happy. Arthur realizes that Vincent's constant meddling and donations are placing unreasonable expectations on Lilia. He decides the best way to fix the situation is to use a drastic trick. He heads into the main room and solemnly tells Vincent, Tabitha, and his parents that Lilia left the house to train in the dangerous place where Arthur used to live. He hands Vincent a fake note claiming Lilia promised to return only when she becomes an amazing sorcerer. Vincent is completely devastated by the letter. He drops to his knees on the patterned floor, crying and calling himself a fool. He realizes he selfishly pushed his own belief that magic equals happiness onto his daughter. He cries out that she doesn't need to be a sorcerer and that he loves her unconditionally even without magic. At that exact moment, Lilia steps out from behind the gold-trimmed door. Having heard every single word, she tearfully apologizes to her parents for lying, while Arthur also steps forward and apologizes for pulling such a cruel trick on them. Vincent and Tabitha immediately rush over and pull Lilia into a massive, emotional hug. Vincent reassures Lilia that she does not have to attend the academy if it causes her so much pain. However, Lilia wipes her tears and insists that she still wants to go. She declares she wants to learn how to use magic so she can become a sorcerer who makes other people happy, just like Arthur does. Seeing her incredible determination, Arthur decides to personally help Lilia awaken her mana. He gathers everyone in the room and instructs Lilia and Eleanor to sit down on the floral rug. He teaches them a specific meditation technique, telling them to take deep breaths and slowly let the air out while keeping their eyes closed. He explains that breathing in a focused manner helps make the mana clearer. Lilia tries it, but she quickly loses focus, and the light in her mind vanishes. Arthur gently encourages her, telling her there is no rush and she just needs to keep breathing steadily. He warns them they might feel a little heat, but they must maintain their focus. After a few moments, the room suddenly fills with gentle, glowing green orbs of light. Lilia successfully visualizes the mana, and her parents watch in absolute amazement as she takes her very first step toward becoming a real sorcerer. To celebrate this massive achievement, the entire family gathers in the tavern area for a grand feast. They cheer loudly, clinking their massive wooden mugs together. The staff brings out plates piled high with fatty duck, exactly what Lilia had requested earlier. As they enjoy the food, Arthur warns Lilia that it might take 2 or 3 years for her power to fully stabilize. He tells her it will be a lot of hard work, but she must keep practicing her breathing exercises every single day. Lilia happily agrees, her face lighting up as she wonders what kind of magical elements she will eventually be able to use. The group continues to laugh and celebrate around the table. As Arthur watches everyone having a great time, his thoughts shift toward the upcoming event at the Helsty auction house. With his new life finally settling down, he wonders what kind of rare and amusing items will be up for sale. When Arthur and his family arrive at the Helsty auction house, they are immediately blown away by its massive size and castle-like architecture. Tabitha reassures Alice that they are dressed perfectly for the high-class event, while Arthur eagerly anticipates seeing all the rare items Vincent has managed to collect. Walking down the red-carpeted grand hall, they pass by several glass display cases holding incredibly valuable beast cores and ornate statues. Arthur finds the high-quality items fascinating and notes that this is a prime opportunity to see what wealthy aristocrats and adventurers are buying. They soon spot Reynolds acting as the head of security, looking very sharp in his black suit and red armband. He barks strict orders to his guards to keep their heads on a swivel and avoid any mistakes. Eleanor thinks her dad looks totally different and incredibly cool, and Alice promises to tell Reynolds about the compliment later. Eventually, everyone takes their seats as Vincent steps onto the brightly lit stage to kick off the 10th anniversary auction. He introduces the guests of honor sitting on the elevated balcony, announcing the presence of King Blaine Glader, Queen Priscilla, Prince Curtis, and Princess Kathleen. Arthur observes the royal family and notes that the king seems exceptionally popular among the citizens as the crowd cheers wildly. Vincent starts the bidding with a beautifully crafted sword that can channel electricity to paralyze enemies. The bidding starts at 50 gold pieces, and Arthur watches the price climb, making a mental note to try applying elemental enchantments to his own weapons in the future. Next, Vincent showcases some creepy gray stone masks, but Arthur's attention is pulled away when Alice asks where Sylvie went. Arthur realizes his little dragon is missing, and leaves the auditorium to track her down. Back on stage, Vincent presents a world lion cub locked inside a metal cage, explaining that the rare beast has the potential to grow into a powerful A-class monster. Princess Kathleen immediately points out that she wants the cub, so King Blaine drops a massive bid of 1,000 gold coins right out of the gate. With no one daring to outbid the ruler of the country, the king easily secures the magical pet. He hands the responsibility of raising the cub to Prince Curtis, warning him that his success will depend entirely on his own efforts, and Curtis eagerly accepts the challenge. Meanwhile, Sylvie wanders through the auction house hallways and accidentally bumps into Sebastian, an older gray-haired man serving as the royal conjurer and personal bodyguard to the king. Sebastian is instantly captivated by the unique black dragon and kneels down to inspect her. Arthur arrives just in time and politely asks the man to hand his partner back. Sebastian assumes Sylvie is an auction item that Arthur just bought, noting that the boy is very lucky to own such a docile creature. However, Arthur clarifies that Sylvie is his personal companion and tries to walk away. Sebastian's greed gets the better of him, and he blocks Arthur's path, demanding that the boy leave the beast behind. He claims that he has been searching for a mana beast worthy of his abilities and insists that only a royal conjurer like him can tap into Sylvie's full potential. Arthur flatly refuses the ridiculous demand. Sebastian tries to assert his dominance by launching a massive stream of fire down the hallway, telling Arthur to be grateful for the opportunity to form a contract with him. When Arthur remains completely unfazed by the flames, Sebastian loses his temper. He brags about his status as a royal servant and threatens to hold Arthur's entire family responsible if the boy continues to defy the crown. Hearing his family threatened is the absolute last straw for Arthur. He unleashes an overwhelming wave of terrifying killing intent that instantly floods the entire building. His right eye glows bright blue and yellow markings appear on his face as the sheer pressure of his magical aura shatters the grand stained glass windows. The massive surge of bloodlust plunges the auction house into total chaos, forcing everyone inside to their knees in sheer panic. Even the king and his elite guards are completely paralyzed by the terrifying presence. Arthur quickly snaps out of his rage and realizes he let his emotions get the better of him. He rushes to check on his family, apologizing to his father for ruining the security detail, but Reynolds is completely focused on organizing the evacuation and tells Arthur not to worry about it. Sometime later, King Blaine summons Reynolds to a private room to discuss the massive security failure. Reynolds kneels before the king and takes full responsibility for the incident, fully expecting to face severe disciplinary action. However, Sebastian steps in and suggests a different approach. He tells the king that instead of punishing Reynolds, they should simply demand Arthur's rare beast as a fair trade for the royal family's mercy. Sebastian claims that giving him the beast is the perfect reward for his many years of loyal service to the crown. King Blaine agrees with the plan and formally asks Reynolds to hand over the creature. Reynolds respectfully declines, explaining that Arthur acquired the beast on his own and has total ownership over her, meaning Reynolds cannot force his son to give her up. The king turns his attention to Arthur, expecting the boy to eagerly comply. Arthur apologizes but firmly states that he will never find a replacement for Sylvie and refuses the request. The royal guards instantly scold Arthur for disrespectfully looking the king directly in the eye, but Arthur ignores their yelling. Trying a different tactic, King Blaine offers to trade his newly purchased world lion cub for Sylvie, arguing that predatory beasts are far superior to reptilian ones anyway. Arthur rejects the trade yet again, making it abundantly clear that he has absolutely no intention of relinquishing or selling his partner. The king is completely dumbfounded and furious that a child has rejected his direct requests 3 times in a row. Arthur then pushes the envelope even further by asking the king a hypothetical question, wondering exactly what price it would take for the king to willingly sell his own children. This blatant disrespect shatters the king's pride and completely enrages Sebastian. Unable to handle the humiliation, Sebastian orders the royal guards to execute the arrogant boy on the spot. 2 heavily armored knights charge at Arthur with their spear and sword drawn, but Arthur effortlessly intercepts them. He knocks both elite soldiers out in a blinding flash of yellow energy, leaving them unconscious on the decorative floor. Shocked that a child just decimated the royal guard, Sebastian decides to handle things himself. He points his ornate golden staff at Arthur and unleashes a massive torrent of fire. Arthur decides to end the fight instantly. He pushes his magical core to its absolute limit, causing a brilliant blue aura to erupt from his eye. Utilizing a highly advanced technique, Arthur manages to step entirely outside the normal flow of time, rendering Sebastian's powerful spells completely useless. He moves faster than the eye can track and brutally shatters Sebastian's leg, leaving the royal conjurer agonizing on the floor. Standing victoriously over the defeated mage, Arthur coldly tells Sebastian to remember his place and understand that his royal status means absolutely nothing in the face of true power. The king watches the brutal and overwhelming display in utter shock. However, maintaining the time-stopping ability takes a massive toll on Arthur's young, undeveloped physical body. Unable to sustain the strain, Arthur collapses unconscious onto the floor right in front of the horrified royal family. He eventually wakes up in his bed, suffering from a severe headache. He realizes that overexerting his abilities was far too reckless and acknowledges that he desperately needs more training to handle his own power. His mother, accompanied by Sylvie, rushes into the room, relieved to see him awake. Alice uses her advanced healing magic to fully restore his energy, surrounding him with warm, glowing light particles. Wanting to clear his head and get a change of scenery, Arthur goes on a shopping trip with Alice to the bustling market square of Xyrus City. They browse through the vibrant stalls decorated with festive red bunting, and Alice buys a cute pink heart-shaped hair clip. She hands it to Arthur and suggests he be the one to give it to Eleanor as a gift. Arthur worries about their financial situation, assuming that Reynolds definitely lost his prestigious security job after the massive disaster at the auction. Alice laughs and quickly reassures him, revealing that she has actually been making a substantial income on her own. With Tabitha's help and noble connections, Alice has been successfully selling her high-quality healing products to wealthy aristocrats all over the city. When Arthur and Alice return to the Helstia mansion carrying their shopping bags, they walk straight into a tense meeting. Vincent and Reynolds are sitting in the drawing room with a royal emissary wearing a red suit and glasses. The emissary formally apologizes on behalf of King Blaine and places a large red bag filled with gold coins on the coffee table as a gesture of goodwill. He explains that the king considers the matter entirely settled and has already fired the 2 royal guards who attacked Arthur. Reynolds angrily points out that the king let the guards off incredibly easy considering they actively tried to murder a child, but the emissary coldly counters that Arthur was the one who defied the crown first. Arthur then asks what happened to Sebastian, curious about the fallout from their fight. The emissary provides a completely fabricated cover story claiming that Sebastian was relieved of his position and sent for medical treatment. According to the official royal report, Sebastian's injuries were supposedly caused by his own spell backfiring after the guard's mana reflected off Arthur. Arthur and Reynolds know this is a total lie designed to protect the royal family's pride and hide the fact that a child crippled their top mage, but they decide to play along with the narrative. Before leaving, the emissary strongly advises Arthur to learn some proper manners, warning him that not everyone in the world will be as forgiving as their ruler. Once the emissary is gone, Reynolds tells Arthur to keep the bag of gold coins, noting that the money will definitely come in handy for whatever he decides to do next. Later that night, Arthur sits alone in his dark bedroom, deeply reflecting on the entire ordeal. He is incredibly frustrated by his physical limitations and realizes that being a child in this world makes him a massive target. He knows that if he truly wants to defy the power of entire nations and protect his loved ones from corrupt nobles, he needs to acquire a significant amount of strength and official authority. He decides that the absolute best way to achieve this goal is to formally enroll in the prestigious Xyrus Magic Academy. The following day, Arthur visits the massive academy campus, taking Sylvie along with him. While exploring the sunlit stone courtyard filled with students and their diverse magical beast mounts, he spots a strange green owl-like creature with red eyebrows perched on a stone ledge. Curious about the unique animal, Arthur chases the bird out of the bustling courtyard and deep into a lush green forest. He runs enthusiastically along the dirt path with Sylvie holding on tightly to his shoulder. Suddenly, he bumps into an elderly woman wearing a purple cloak and a black pointed witch's hat. The woman looks down at Arthur with a knowing smile and calmly tells him that she has been waiting for him. The elderly woman introduces herself as the director holding all authority at Xyrus Academy and states she wants to see if Vincent exaggerated Arthur's magical abilities. Arthur feels an incredible power radiating from her but decides to show off a little to prove Vincent was telling the truth. He initiates the test by using wind element magic, conjuring swirling green energy that lifts several large rocks into the air around him. However, he quickly realizes his wind magic lacks the destructive firepower of his fire and water elements. The director easily halts his attack, magically suspending the rocks in midair with a casual wave of her hand. Arthur switches tactics and unleashes intense orange magical flames, sending sharp shards of golden energy raining down upon her. The director effortlessly defends against the barrage by summoning a glowing green seal that creates a massive wall of wind. Surprised by her impenetrable defense, Arthur envelops himself in a powerful vortex of red and orange magical energy and lunges straight at her. The director repels him with a forceful blast of green magical energy that sends him sliding aggressively across the grassy field. As Arthur struggles to push himself up from the dirt, the director compliments his remarkable sorcery and combat skills but decides to finish the evaluation. She warns him to try not to lose consciousness and conjures 2 spheres of teal energy that erupt into massive, rippling shockwaves. The magical ripples surge over Arthur, causing him immense pain and forcing him to his knees as he realizes she is utilizing the incredibly rare element of sound. The director dissipates her magic and announces that he passes the test. She expresses a desire to teach him personally due to his impressive wind magic and correctly guesses he can also use the earth element. Arthur admits he can use water as well, realizing she has completely seen through all of his hidden capabilities. Deciding to be entirely blunt, Arthur proposes a formal negotiation. He tells the director he needs her influence and authority to protect his family from any future threats. In exchange for her sharing that political power, he promises to enroll at the academy in 3 years when he is the same age as the other children and revere her as his master. The director smiles and notes that not even the royal family attempts such bold negotiations. Questioning why he wants to wait 3 years when starting his studies immediately would make him much stronger, Arthur explains he wants to live his life to the fullest by becoming an adventurer and learning about the world first. The director accepts his terms and agrees to complete the deal once he officially convinces his family. Arthur returns to the Helstia mansion and uses Vincent as an intermediary to reveal his magical powers and his adventurer plans to his parents. Alice vehemently rejects the idea, shouting that it is inconceivable to send their son on a dangerous journey right after getting him back. Reynolds tries to calm her down, suggesting they at least hear Arthur out before making a final decision. Alice remains furious, reminding Reynolds of the severe hardships they already endured, but Reynolds proposes sending Arthur with a trusted protector. Arthur assures his mother that it will not be a continuous journey and promises to return home every few months or even more frequently if she wishes. Eleanor grabs Arthur's arm and asks if he is leaving soon, but he promises he will not leave for a while. He explains to his parents that staying home merely to train would be dull, and he wants to experience the same adventurous life they once had. Arthur keeps his true motive of wanting to test his combat strength a secret to avoid causing his parents more worry. Reynolds agrees that danger goes hand in hand with adventuring and officially proposes finding someone they can trust to accompany Arthur on the road. They gather their former adventuring party, the Twin Horns, around the dining table to ask for a volunteer. Adam quickly passes on the job, stating he hates babysitting and jokes that Arthur might murder him in his sleep because the boy is unpleasant. Arthur retorts that Adam's rudeness entirely warrants such hostile treatment. Durden points out that his wide-area spells make him better suited for protecting groups rather than individuals, and Helen admits guarding people is not her strong suit either. Suddenly, Jasmine raises her hand and volunteers, stating she is taking the job purely for Arthur's sake. Reynolds realizes Jasmine is the best choice due to her close combat skills, her status as a light orange core augmenter, and her proficiency in wind magic. Arthur thanks the group and expresses his excitement to work with Jasmine. Later, Arthur watches Lilia successfully meditate without his help, noting that Eleanor will likely awaken her own magic in a few years if she keeps practicing. He then asks Reynolds for permission to visit the auction house to pick out a sword for his upcoming Adventurer Guild entrance exam. Reynolds agrees, and Arthur heads to the massive storage room with Vincent to browse the inventory. Arthur searches through numerous racks of steel swords and polearms, but everything is designed for adult augmenters and feels far too heavy and unbalanced for his small body. As he searches alongside Sylvie, he spots a long, heavy black staff resting near a large cannon wheel. He picks it up and notices the weight distribution feels more like a sword than a traditional staff. Curious about its true nature, he channels his magical energy directly into the weapon. The staff instantly sheds its wooden exterior, revealing a beautiful, glowing cyan energy blade. Arthur swings the weapon, cleanly slicing a solid wooden barrel in half with a single strike. He examines the glowing blade and reads the inscription, Dawn's Ballad W. Tay, IV etched into the metal. He realizes the weapon's weight, balance, and grip have magically adjusted to perfectly suit his small body, a phenomenon he never encountered with any weapon in his past life. Vincent and his workers walk into the storage room, prompting Arthur to quickly hide the glowing blade inside a dark scabbard. Vincent examines the sheathed sword and notes it feels a little off balance, but Arthur claims he took a liking to it anyway. When Vincent asks about the staff Arthur has strapped to his waist, one of the workers explains it was an unidentified item dumped by an old man that several appraisers deemed to be nothing more than a sturdy stick. Arthur asks if he can keep it for practice, and Vincent happily gifts it to him since Arthur addressed him respectfully as Uncle. Over the next few weeks, Arthur spends his time practicing with his new sword, sparring with Reynolds in the garden, and preparing his travel checklist. Eventually, his 9th birthday arrives, and the family throws a massive outdoor banquet in the garden to celebrate. They fill a large round table with meat skewers, fish, bread, and a giant strawberry cake. After everyone finishes eating, they move into the living room to exchange gifts. Alice and Reynolds present Arthur with a black gauntlet featuring silver plating and 3 green gemstones. Alice explains she personally enchanted the gems with healing magic to keep him safe. Next, Vincent and Tabitha give the family a pair of gold rings. They give one ring with a red gemstone to Alice and a plain gold ring to Arthur. Vincent explains that if Arthur's mana ever drops to a dangerously low level, Alice's ring will immediately light up to warn her. Finally, Adam hands Arthur an incredibly expensive magical scroll marked with a red sigil. He explains that Arthur can use his mana to record voice messages on the scroll, and once Alice receives it, she can send one reply back to him. Arthur thanks everyone for the wonderful presents and promises to work hard so they will not have to worry about him while he is away. Later that night, Arthur sits alone in his bedroom and reflects on his current life. He realizes that he deeply cherishes the security and love his family and friends provide, and he vows to fight with everything he has to defend them. To ensure he never loses them, he resolves to become even stronger than he was as a king in his past life. He packs his green bedroll, his weapons, and a white mask into his backpack. He walks down the grand marble staircase to say his final goodbyes to his family in the main hall. Reynolds tells Arthur he looks like an S-rank adventurer, but warns him not to let his strength make him cocky. He advises Arthur not to try solving every problem alone and to rely on Jasmine when things get too difficult. Alice gives Arthur a tight hug and begs him to stay safe, while Eleanor and Sylvie watch from nearby. Alice tells Sylvie to be a good girl and reminds Arthur to put his new ring on before he leaves. Arthur promises he will be back and walks out the large wooden doors of the mansion with Sylvie safely tucked into his backpack. Outside the metal gates, Jasmine is waiting for him on the stone-paved path wearing her dark green travel outfit. Arthur asks if she is ready, and as the dark night sky transitions into a colorful sunrise over the mountains, they set off on their new journey together. Arthur and Jasmine arrive at the Xyrus branch of the Adventurers Guild so Arthur can undergo his rank assessment. Because Jasmine is an A-class adventurer and her father has deep connections with the guild, they are allowed to skip the standard written exam and Monocore confirmation. They meet the guild chief, Caspian Bladeheart, in his office. Arthur registers under the alias Note to ensure the royal family cannot track his true identity. Caspian agrees to use the pseudonym and shakes Arthur's hand, using the physical contact to secretly test the boy's strength and magical flow. Caspian is instantly impressed by Arthur's underlying power and escorts them to the exam hall. Along the way, Jasmine notices that Sylvie looks different, and Arthur explains that his familiar can slightly alter her appearance, currently taking the shape of a small black bat to avoid drawing unwanted attention. They enter the large outdoor exam arena where several other candidates are being tested. A young girl named Diane Whitehall takes her practical exam first, demonstrating excellent mana control and incantation speed, but the examiner points out that her magical defenses are severely lacking and assigns her to C-class. Next, the examiner calls Elijah Knight to the floor. However, without Elijah even taking a combat test, the examiner immediately announces that he is assigned to B-class, leaving the audience and the other candidates completely baffled by the special treatment. After Elijah steps down, an 11-year-old half-elf named Lucas Wyke steps forward for his turn. Lucas arrogantly asks the examiner if he can skip the test and jump straight to A-class. The examiner ignores his comment and confirms his registration details, noting that he is at the light orange core stage and specializes in fire magic. As the duel begins, Lucas summons a massive pillar of orange flames and unleashes a devastating dragon-shaped blast of fire directly at the examiner. The intense magical explosion shatters the stone arena floor and sends debris flying everywhere. The examiner manages to block the attack with a green magical shield, but the sheer force of Lucas's spell wreaks havoc on the surrounding environment. Despite the impressive display of raw power, the examiner points out that Lucas lacks control and assigns him to B-class. Furious at the ranking, Lucas waits until the examiner lowers her guard and launches a fiery sneak attack at her back. The examiner easily neutralizes the flames and summons a giant stone hand from the earth to lift Lucas into the air, scolding him for attacking after the match has officially concluded and stating that his arrogance is his greatest weakness. Lucas refuses to accept the criticism and threatens that his influential father will hear about the incident. Once the arena is cleared, it is finally Arthur's turn to take the practical exam. However, Caspian steps onto the field and announces that he will personally administer the test. The regular examiners are shocked because Caspian is an AA-class adventurer and rarely tests newcomers himself. Arthur draws his sword and coats the blade in bright orange flames, launching himself at the guild chief with blinding speed. Caspian easily parries Arthur's attacks with flawless defense, gracefully blocking every fiery strike without breaking a sweat or yielding any ground. The two clash repeatedly in the center of the arena, creating massive explosions of yellow sparks and glowing embers that light up the cloudy sunset sky. Despite landing no direct hits, Arthur puts up an incredible fight, pushing his physical body to its absolute limits while raining down magical energy. However, Arthur quickly realizes that his movements are slightly awkward because his physical body is still too young and undeveloped to properly execute the advanced sword techniques from his past life. After the intense duel concludes and the smoke clears, Caspian officially registers Arthur as a B-class adventurer and hands him his golden guild plate. Later, Caspian holds a private meeting with the other examiners to discuss the unprecedented event of assigning 3 children to B-class in a single day. They discuss the recent lifting of the kingdom's prohibition on elf and dwarf adventurers, which explains the sudden influx of diverse candidates. Caspian explains that Lucas belongs to the Wykes family, a noble house notorious for using questionable methods to produce powerful mages, heavily implying that Lucas is the child of an elven slave. As for Elijah, Caspian reveals that the boy is a human raised by dwarves in the Darv Kingdom and is backed by a powerful guarantor that the guild cannot overrule. When the examiners ask about the masked boy named Note, Caspian admits he knows very little about his true identity, but finds it fascinating that his guarantor belongs to the Flamesworth family, who are renowned for their unmatched fire magic. Caspian notes that while Arthur's fire spells were incredibly potent, his true potential lies in his extraordinary swordsmanship, predicting that Arthur will become an absolute monster on the battlefield once his physical body fully matures. Meanwhile, Arthur spaces out in the guild hallway, realizing that since coming to this new world, he has relied far too heavily on his magical abilities and has severely neglected the diligent sword training that made him so strong in his past life. His duel with Caspian made him acutely aware of his physical shortcomings. Suddenly, Lucas approaches Arthur and Jasmine in the hallway, acting incredibly smug. He asks if there was a secret B-class gathering he wasn't invited to and accuses them of excluding him because he broke the rules during his exam. When Elijah and Jasmine tell him to back off, Lucas grabs Arthur by the collar, declaring that even within the same rank, there are different levels of power. Jasmine immediately steps in and orders Lucas to stop, forcing him to release his grip. Annoyed by the unwanted attention, Arthur and Jasmine decide to leave the guild and head straight to their first training destination. They travel to a beast pasture, a relatively peaceful grassy valley surrounded by mountains where lower-class adventurers usually go to train and gather basic materials. Jasmine explains that they are using the area as a stepping stone before heading to more dangerous territories. As they walk through the lush green fields, they stumble upon a destroyed carriage and several heavily injured adventurers lying in the grass. Suddenly, a massive 4-tusked boar monster with glowing red eyes and thick armor plating bursts out of the nearby forest. Jasmine quickly realizes that the mutated beast is not native to the area and guesses that someone captured it alive, only for it to escape and wreak havoc. The giant boar locks eyes on them and charges across the field at terrifying speed, its heavy hooves tearing up the dirt and leaving a massive cloud of gray smoke in its wake. Realizing they cannot outrun it, Jasmine tells Arthur to flee while she draws her short swords and intercepts the monster. She uses her incredible speed to leap onto the boar's back and strikes its thick hide repeatedly, leaving white streaks of energy in the air, but her blades barely leave a scratch on its heavy, metal-like armor. The boar violently shakes her off, forcing her to leap away before she gets crushed by its massive tusks. Arthur rushes in and catches Jasmine before she hits the ground, gently setting her down on the grass. Realizing that he can no longer afford to hesitate or hold back his true strength, Arthur draws his glowing blue sword and steps between Jasmine and the charging beast. He channels a massive amount of magical energy, engulfing himself in a swirling vortex of red and orange flames. He dashes forward with incredible speed and traps the giant boar inside a spherical cage of glowing fire, completely restricting its movement. Before the beast can break free, Arthur delivers a devastating fiery slash with his blade, cutting the monster down in a single strike and leaving its massive carcass burning in the grass. Later that evening, as the sun sets over the mountains, Arthur and Jasmine stand near the defeated boar while the other adventurers secure the area. Jasmine playfully pinches Arthur's cheek, scolding him for looking so calm and wishing he would show a little more worry during life-threatening situations. After setting up camp for the night, they sit together on a log next to a crackling fire. Jasmine decides to open up about her past and explains why she became an adventurer. She reveals that the Flamesworth family has produced the most powerful fire sorcerers in the kingdom for generations, and her parents had incredibly high expectations for her because she awakened her magical core at a very young age. However, when her family discovered that her elemental affinity was wind instead of fire, they immediately branded her a failure and cast her aside. Hearing her story, Arthur becomes furious on her behalf. He firmly states that while mana cores have different levels of power, there is absolutely no hierarchy when it comes to the elements themselves, and a mage's true strength depends entirely on how well they use their abilities. Jasmine laughs warmly at his outburst, admitting that she has never seen him get so worked up before. Arthur realizes that his sudden anger stems from his past life as King Grey, where he was also labeled a failure and treated poorly before he fought his way to the top. Jasmine continues her story, explaining that she used to be cold and isolated until she met the Twin Horns. Her adventuring party taught her how to cooperate, how to communicate, and most importantly, how to trust others. As Arthur listens, he looks up at the starry night sky and wonders if he can ever truly change from the ruthless, solitary king he used to be. He clenches his fist and reaches out toward the stars, firmly resolving to believe in his own ability to change so that he can always protect the people he loves. Meanwhile, far away in the elven kingdom of Elenoir, Tessia is using a heavy, glowing green magical orb to spy on Arthur. She watches him sitting by the campfire with Jasmine and immediately gets extremely jealous, yelling in frustration about how he always seems to be traveling with a different woman. Her grandfather, Virion, quietly sneaks up behind her and catches her in the act. He tells Tessia that if she is so jealous of Arthur taking on new challenges and growing stronger, she needs to stop complaining and start doing something to improve herself. To help her, Virion hands her an ancient, thick blue book filled with advanced magical techniques and encourages her to begin her own training. 2 entire years pass since Arthur and Jasmine began their journey. Back in the human kingdom, rumors spread rapidly through the local taverns about a legendary masked swordsman traveling alongside the famous Flamesworth girl. Arthur has grown taller and much stronger during his time in the wilderness, and as he stands on a dirt path with Jasmine by his side, he adjusts his white mask and prepares to set out on the next leg of their adventure. Arthur reflects on his past life as King Grey, remembering how he sat on a throne and commanded his soldiers. He recalls his battles in stone arenas where he fought with a glowing turquoise blade and defeated numerous opponents. He also remembers standing in a futuristic city as silver missiles rained down from the sky, causing massive explosions. Standing in a blood-splattered room, he acknowledges that as a king, he took countless lives and committed numerous sins. Despite his dark past, he feels grateful to be granted a second life. In the present, Arthur, going by his adventurer alias Note, is out on a quest with Jasmine. Jasmine goes over their mission details, explaining that contact with the village near the Beast Glades has been lost, and they need to investigate. Jasmine asks Arthur what their main priority is, and he correctly answers that survival always comes first. She then asks what they should do if they encounter an aggressive beast. Arthur replies that since the quest does not include monster slaying, they do not need to fight. Sylvie, Arthur's familiar in the form of a black cat, announces she will train nearby. Arthur tells her good luck and promises to let her know when they finish. Arthur and Jasmine continue their trek into the lush forest and notice several footprints on the dirt path. Arthur points out that tracks head into the village but none head out, making the situation suspicious. Jasmine states that their first move should be gathering intelligence, and Arthur agrees. They use their movement magic to quickly travel through the dense woods and arrive at the deserted village. As they walk past the houses, Arthur observes there are absolutely no signs of people anywhere. Jasmine wonders if a beast attacked, but Arthur notes the complete lack of struggle makes that strange. They spot a massive blue crystal resting on the grass. As they move deeper into the village courtyard, they are shocked to find several more large blue crystals, and upon closer inspection, they realize that the missing villagers are trapped inside them. They find a young girl in an orange dress carrying a basket and ask her what happened. The crying girl explains she was gathering medicinal herbs, and when she got back, everyone was encased in crystals. Arthur deduces that a powerful beast is responsible for this tragedy. Suddenly, a thin blue line of light zips past the little girl, cutting right through her skirt. Jasmine immediately drops into a defensive combat stance and readies her daggers. A massive, multi-eyed brown spider monster emerges from the forest. It grabs a woman in a brown dress, hangs her upside down, and prepares to fire a powerful pink beam from its glowing red central eye. Arthur and Jasmine know they cannot defeat it right now, so they quickly flee the area, running down the winding cobblestone path as the monster destroys the trees behind them. Meanwhile, in a dark room illuminated by a candelabra, an elderly hooded figure and a man with a goatee examine a detailed map. They discuss the Tri-Kingdom alliance between the humans, elves, and dwarves, noting that the arrangement is less than ideal for their hidden plans. The elderly figure holds a small coin and mentions that events have a natural flow, and going with that flow can be quite pleasant. The man with the goatee hovers his glowing green hand over the map and talks about the Beast Glade. He states that the young warriors who will bear the future of the continent on their backs are currently gathering there to hone their skills. The elderly figure declares that this future is something they must prevent at all costs. Back in the forest, Arthur and Jasmine hide in a clearing and discuss the terrifying monster they just encountered. Jasmine identifies it as an arachne, stating that it is one of the top 5 beasts she never wants to fight. She explains that she has fought arachne 5 times in the past, but only managed to kill one, and it took the entire lineup of the Twin Horns adventuring party to pull it off. She specifically notes that Arthur's parents, Reynold and Alice, were there, and Alice's healing powers were absolutely critical to their victory. Jasmine elaborates that an arachne's petrification curse can only be broken by an emitter like Alice, or by killing the arachne itself. However, arachne have incredibly high resistance to magic, so most spells have a limited effect on them, and their thick carapace is tough enough that normal swords simply bounce off. Because they lack the proper means to take it down, Jasmine reminds Arthur that she taught him everything he needs to know about being an adventurer, which includes knowing how to survive. She asks him what their next move should be, and Arthur agrees that they should head back to the guild, inform them of the threat, and return to save the village once they are fully prepared. However, as they hide behind the dense green bushes, the massive arachne sneaks up on them. The monster lunges at them with a glowing purple light. Realizing the extreme danger, Jasmine screams for Arthur to get away and violently shoves him out of the path of the attack. As a result, Jasmine is struck by the monster's magic and gets instantly trapped inside a giant blue ice crystal. Arthur falls to the ground and stares in absolute shock as the massive skeletal spider monster looms over them with its glowing pink eye. Seeing Jasmine sacrifice herself triggers intense flashbacks for Arthur. He remembers his father Reynold yelling in distress, his mother Alice running desperately with his sister Eleanor, and his own past life as King Grey fighting off heavily armored knights in a brilliant flash of golden light. These memories of losing people and failing to protect them fuel his determination, and he refuses to run away. Arthur draws his 2 swords and boldly confronts the giant multi-legged monster. The beast screeches and swings its massive clawed limbs at him, but Arthur uses his dual blades to parry the heavy strikes, exerting an incredible amount of effort just to hold his ground. The arachne unleashes a brilliant white and teal blast of energy from its wide-open maw, completely filling the horizon with destructive magic. Arthur lunges forward and forcefully slices right through the energy beam with his swords. He thinks back to his past life, remembering how a single swing of his blade was all it took to win his battles as the strongest king. Channeling that past power, he leaps into the air and plunges both his glowing blue energy sword and his silver metal sword directly into the monster's head, causing bright orange sparks to fly everywhere. However, the arachne simply shakes him off. Arthur remembers a futuristic battle from his past life, where soldiers fired powerful energy beams, and he realizes that standard sword strikes simply will not be enough to penetrate the beast's thick armor. Deciding to change tactics, he tries using blade and flame together. He engulfs his swords in vibrant orange and red flames and unleashes a massive fiery explosion against the monster. He stands on top of the beast as swirling flames consume the area, hoping that the intense heat will burn through its shell. Unfortunately, as the fire clears, the arachne roars fiercely, completely unharmed due to its high magic resistance. The monster retaliates by summoning massive, jagged, dark, rocky spikes from the ground, forcing Arthur to dodge frantically. Realizing that all external attacks are entirely pointless against its shell, Arthur formulates a new, desperate strategy. He asks out loud if the beast has ever had magic cast directly on its insides. Arthur leaps onto the monster's back and violently stabs his glowing blue sword deep into the cracks of its red-spiked armor. Instead of trying to cut it, he channels a massive surge of blue electrical energy straight through the blade and into the creature's internal organs. The sheer internal pressure causes the giant yellowish-brown monster to glow with a blinding white light before it completely shatters into countless pieces across the grassy field. With the beast finally defeated, Arthur walks past its steaming remains and sheathes his sword. He collapses onto the grass, breathing heavily and covered in sweat. He reflects on the fight, noting that mixing his old fighting style with this new world's magic puts way too much strain on his young body, and he acknowledges that he needs to train significantly more to reach his goals. Suddenly, Sylvie jumps right onto his face. Arthur sits up and holds her, asking if something is wrong. Sylvie mentions that she felt him get really angry for a second during the fight. Arthur smiles and reassures her that he just lost his temper, but he took care of the threat and everything is fine now. Meanwhile, with the arachne dead, the petrification curse is automatically broken, and Jasmine is freed from her crystal prison. She approaches Arthur with her knife drawn and scolds him, stating that she could easily beat him up right now for doing something so incredibly reckless. Arthur apologizes for ignoring her instructions and fighting the monster alone. Jasmine lowers her weapon and asks him if he actually beat it by himself. Arthur confirms that he did, but admits that the power he used isn't the kind of power he truly wants. Jasmine asks what kind of power he is searching for, and Arthur replies that he wants the power to protect. He explains that in his past life, his weakness separated him from his family, and he promises to live his current life in a way that leads him with absolutely no regrets so he can protect the people he cares about. Jasmine tells him that he shouldn't take such massive risks on her behalf because his mother Alice would be absolutely devastated if he died. Arthur replies that he can't do that because he genuinely cares about Jasmine too. Hearing this, Jasmine gets completely flustered, blushes deeply, and angrily pulls on Arthur's cheeks, yelling at him that the only thing he gets better at is talking. However, her anger quickly fades into a warm smile, and she places her hands on his shoulders, sincerely thanking him for saving her life. Arthur tells her not to mention it. They look at the defeated Arachne and Jasmine suggests they should collect its valuable mana core, but they ultimately leave it behind. Later that night, Arthur and Jasmine arrive at a bustling medieval tavern to report their success. Inside, they meet up with a boy with glasses and the arrogant noble Lucas Wykes. When Arthur tells them about fighting the Arachne, the boy with glasses is amazed they survived. But Lucas immediately accuses Arthur of lying, stating that Arachne never come to the surface and demanding to see the mana core as proof. Since they didn't collect the core, Arthur instead pulls out the Arachne's massive yellow cursing eye of petrification and slams it onto the wooden table. The entire group stares at the giant monster head in absolute awe, realizing it is the real deal. Lucas is briefly surprised but quickly recovers his smug attitude, boasting that a mana beast like that would still be no match for his elite skills. Arthur sarcastically tells Lucas that he will be sure to call him for help next time. Lucas ignores the comment and confidently storms out of the tavern. After he leaves, Jasmine tells Arthur that it is time for them to head home. They travel back to Zyra City and arrive at the Grand Helstea mansion. As soon as Arthur walks through the large double doors, his little sister Eleanor runs up and gives him a massive hug. His parents, Reynold and Alice, along with Vincent and Tabitha Helstea, are all thrilled to see him. They gather in the elegant living room, and Vincent excitedly asks to hear about Arthur's epic adventure. Arthur casually mentions that he fought an Arachne and beat it by focusing his attacks on a single spot and casting magic on its insides. Instead of being impressed, Alice becomes completely furious. She immediately forces both Arthur and Jasmine to kneel on the floor in front of everyone. Alice aggressively scolds them for breaking their promise to avoid dangerous situations, screaming that an Arachne is a top-tier beast that they should have run from immediately. Jasmine sincerely apologizes for letting the situation escalate, but Arthur tries to defend her, taking full responsibility for the fight. Alice refuses to listen to his excuses and continues yelling, deeply upset that Arthur risked his life. Reynold steps in and tries to calm Alice down, advising Arthur to simply follow Jasmine's instructions next time. He points out to his wife that while the situation was incredibly dangerous, Arthur did an amazing job surviving and making it back home. Hearing this, Alice finally breaks down and cries, revealing that she doesn't care about his achievements and is just terrified of losing him. Arthur smiles gently and promises his mother that he will not make her worry so much in the future. Later, Arthur and Jasmine head out to the mansion's paved courtyard for a sparring match. Jasmine hands Arthur a wooden practice sword and declares that they will not use any magic for this duel. They clash their wooden swords fiercely, moving with incredible speed and leaving bright yellow streaks of light in the air. During the intense exchange of blows, Arthur realizes what he truly lacked in his past life. He understands that despite being a powerful king, he had no one to defend. But in this life, he finally has a family and friends to protect, and he needs more power to ensure their safety. They finish their sparring match, and Arthur thanks Jasmine for the lesson. As he looks up at the bright blue sky, he casually wonders what his childhood friend Tessia is currently up to. Meanwhile, far away in a dusty mountainous landscape, Tessia is stranded on top of a massive round boulder wedged tightly between two jagged cliffs. Covered in dirt and surrounded by her equally miserable companions, Tessia screams and cries in absolute frustration, demanding to know why no one ever warned her about how awful this training would be.